this episode of We Do a Little, we are joined by the incredible Bryan Brinkman. Bryan is a gigachad artist and animator who worked on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon for over 7 years, while being early to cryptoart and selling work at Sothebys and Christies. We dive into Bryan's childhood in Nebraska, the journey from art school to becoming a professional artist, how the Brinkman color palette came to exist, and so much more. As always, this podcast is for entertainment purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Andy, D's, and guests may own NFTs discussed.
This is Andy.
Yeah,
I'm Beats.
GM, everybody. We are back again with another episode of the We Do a Little pod. Today, we are joined by the legend, Bryan Brinkman. Bryan is one of the first artists I feel like I met when I joined the space through art blocks. He's someone who's dropped NFTs on, I think, every single platform that exists. And he has a storied career as a creator and artist before even getting into the NFT space. So without further ado, Bryan, thank you for joining us.
Wow.
And Bryan brought me this great gift. So I'm just going to open this up here on the camera.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We got a super rare Bryan Brinkman Zippo lighter, and we will do a close-up and zoom in on this later on. But
cut two.
It's my first custom Zippo.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
And you hooked it up.
And
with
it glows in the dark. So
we might have to turn the lights off later on.
We'll all go in the bathroom.
Yeah.
Turn the lights off.
Group bathroom sessions to
Yeah.
go in. But Bryan, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for showing the Zippo. And I'm wearing the hoodie. This is all from the same super rare drop I did four months ago. But yeah, I'm doing great. It's a nice rainy day in New York.
Rainy day here in New York.
Yeah, it's gloomy. Tired.
It's very gloomy. Yeah, it's that depression weather going on. But no, it's great to have you guys in the city. You live here all the time, right?
Yeah, I'm in Brooklyn.
I want to dive deep on your life way before NFTs.
Sure.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska. So
And
I'm a Midwest kid.
How long did you stay in Omaha, Nebraska?
My whole childhood. I stayed there until I was 18, and then I jumped over to Philadelphia to go to college. So I went to school at the University of the Arts, which is like right in the middle of downtown Philly, and that was kind of a nice like stepping stone to New York, which I moved to shortly after.
And you haven't been back to Omaha other than seeing family and stuff,
I haven't moved back. No, I think once you get a taste for bigger cities, it's hard to go back.
Did you know when you were? I mean, you went to art school, so clearly you knew. But how did you know that like you were going to be an artist or a creator?
So when I was in high school, probably early high school, I was kind of experimenting with like taking graphic design courses, and then I started learning some software. Like it was called Adobe Live Motion, which is like early Adobe After Effects or like early Flash. And so I was making these like online cartoons for this website called Newgrounds. And so
shout out Newgrounds.
Yeah, Newgrounds.
I remember that.
OG.
Yeah.
But so you'd upload these videos, and they were kind of stupid and whatever. But you'd immediately get comments, and like people would rate it. And if you got under, I think it was like, if you got below 3 stars on a rating, they would cut your thing from the site. And so you're like, okay, I gotta, you make stuff, it would get taken down, and I'm gonna make something more. And like that kind of repetition of making content, having people comment on it, started really like fueling my interest in making like short animations. And then through Newgrounds, I met a buddy of mine named Edmund, who was like, hey, you got to check out this college. I just got accepted to it in Philly. It's cool. And so like, yeah, Newgrounds was my gateway to this like long road of becoming an animator.
I mean, I think of Newgrounds, I think of videos like End of the World.
Yeah.
Like those crazy videos.
It's like E-Bombs era.
Yeah. And you're like in middle school watching this crazy shit.
It's like weird stick figure animation thing.
And they had like the early Flash games that were kind of weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a goofy site, and like every day, I mean, that was like a pre-YouTube world. Where like you couldn't put videos on the internet because they were so big that you had to make everything in these like vector Flash files in order to get like any sort of like content on the web, which is like a total relic now. Like Flash is like no longer on the internet. But yeah, no, that kind of like that making content, seeing people respond to it, kind of fueled everything afterwards, whether it was making stuff for like Tumblr or for, Live Journal or whatever. I was just always making this like digital content, putting it out there. And eventually it became, stuff I would make for galleries or like concert posters or music videos and all these other things along the way. And that was always kind of like my side projects that I did while I worked in the TV industry.
So, yeah, we'll get into the TV industry in a minute, but I was working my way up sequentially. So in college, you're in Philly. What are some of your first creating? Were you just making posters then too? Did you start out making posters?
I was doing when you go to like art school that first year, they just make you learn everything. Yeah. Because they're like, oh, you're like a young kid. You might not really know what you want to do. So you have to learn sculpture. You have to learn, photography. You have to learn all this stuff. And so I went down that animation path, and then I was making like acrylic paintings on canvases and like selling them in the parks there.
Nice.
And so that was like kind of, because as an art student, you're like, how do I make some money on the side? And you just like paint some stuff and try and sell it on the street. And so, yeah, I think I was making that. I was making some short films, and then you try to make these short films and submit them to festivals. One of the early advices I got was like every project you do, put a title and a credit sequence on it, and then it'll be a film versus just an experiment. And I thought that was so smart. And so by the end of it, I had like 50 films, and I could send them out to like festivals in like Florida and stuff, and then you could like do the film festival route. But that's not really a sustainable career in itself unless you like get picked up by like a big studio to make something.
Yeah. So you got your foot in the door in a way by just making all these, putting them out there, and having...
And all those things can then go on YouTube and all these other places. But it's all just content creation in an early form.
So while you're in art school, outside of animation, are there any other forms of art that you particularly were fond of that you don't create too much in today? Like, I feel like most of your art's digital.
Yeah, I don't really do a lot of painting as much anymore. I recently did one for Art Basel.
Yeah.
And that was like a real throwback because it's been quite a few years now. But I'm not a big fan of like oil painting. I don't have the patience to let it dry.
Yeah.
But I'm a big fan of like acrylic and stuff like that. So, maybe I'll get back into that. It's fun to see all these artists kind of jumping and making physical stuff again. But yeah, I don't know. I made a lot of weird like sculptural stuff, but none of that stuff, I don't think it holds up very well. It's all like, you make it when you're like 18 in art school. It doesn't look that good over time.
No, I know.
Everything you make then you're like, oh, this is brilliant. And then 2 years later, you're like, that looks terrible.
I think it's probably a bad sign if you're looking back and not thinking that, right?
Yeah,
because that means you're not like growing.
Yes. Yeah. I think most artists are probably instantly critical of everything they put out. And if not, I don't know, maybe that's just like when you're in art school, you're in this situation where you're critiqued all the time. And so you put your stuff on a wall, and then the professor goes over and goes, this sucks because this, and this. And that just like everyone comes out of art school like self-doubting and like worrying about their art. And so I think that just becomes like embedded in you by like force.
That's interesting because there's probably a interesting dichotomy between people who went to art school and like there's creators in the NFT space who aren't even like old enough to either be in college or like maybe like freshmen or sophomores in college. They kind of like didn't maybe get those critiques. Yeah. And I'm curious maybe how that'll change. But
you might remember when that Jerry Saltz joined the space briefly and he started critiquing people.
Oh,
and people lost their minds. They just like could not handle any sort of criticism.
Well, I do think it's actually one of the kind of funny things. Like, it's so interesting that there really isn't very much, if any, public like critiquing of art. But like at the same time, when you have like a global, always on marketplace, the price people are willing to pay is the critique of the art to a certain
That's
extent.
That's very true. Yeah.
Where it's like, if people like it, they'll buy it. If they don't, they won't. And like, what's a more valid critique than that in a lot of ways?
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it. Fast forward, or
wait, hold on. I went to school right outside of Philly.
Oh, really?
I went to Villanova.
Oh, yeah.
Did you stay in Philly after you graduated, or did you go straight from Philly to New York?
I stayed in Philly for the summer while I was looking for work. I was working as a waiter on South Street.
Nice. Yeah.
And so I got my first job which I guess segues into the next part.
Yeah.
I guess it was like a jack of all trades at this fashion ad agency where they put me in a corner and they're like, all right, you're going to be our editor. You're going to be our motion graphics guy. You're going to be our web guy. You're going to do everything we can because we usually freelance all that out, but we just hired you and you can learn it all. And I was like, okay, cool. And then I started doing, they're like, oh, you're not very good at editing. So we're going to pay for you to go to SVA and take like continuing ed courses and learn how to be an editor. And I was like, okay, cool. So it was like a good early job that like made my strength stronger.
They like wanted to help you grow.
Yeah.
It sounds like
Yeah,
they didn't say like, oh, you suck at editing, we're hiring an editor. They're like, oh no, like we think you have the potential to be good at this. Go get a little
So
train on it.
I appreciated that. And I worked there for about 2 years.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
What was your go-to cheesesteak spot in Philly?
Oh, that's a good question. There was this place near my college called Paolo's, which I don't think is there anymore. But they used to make a portobello mushroom cheesesteak, and that was really good. But I think, what was it, Jim's on South Street?
Jim's is
pretty
great.
good.
Yeah.
I usually try to avoid the touristy ones.
Yeah,
but
Pat's and Geno's aren't too good.
what I really at a certain point, you eat a lot of cheesesteaks, and I still eat a lot of cheesesteaks. But I became really fond of buffalo chicken cheesesteaks.
Yeah.
And that's like my jam. And so like that's something you can find cheesesteak places in New York, but it's very hard to find buffalo chicken cheesesteak places.
What toppings on the buffalo chicken
Oh,
cheesesteak?
you just get blue cheese and buffalo sauce.
That's
and
it?
they just dice up the chicken really fine.
No tomato,
No,
No
I don't.
lettuce.
I don't do that lettuce and tomato stuff now.
meat and cheese.
I think maybe this is a hot take. I don't know. I think I almost like the roast pork sandwiches that came
Yeah.
out of Philly more than the cheesesteaks.
They're good.
Yeah, there's a place in Williamsburg actually, Federoff's.
I've heard
roast
of it.
pork.
Yeah, it's like a Philly style place, right?
It's Philly style roast pork sandwiches. Oh my god, it's fucking amazing.
There used to be
recommend
what 99 miles to Philly was down the street from here. That used to be pretty good. And then there was Shorty's, which I think there's still a few Shorty's, but I think a few of them have closed.
Is New York only 99 miles from Philly?
Yes,
Jesus.
but
My geography's horrible. I was like, that sounds impossible. It's probably like 250.
if you want my New York cheesesteak insider info,
Oh, always.
in Long Island City, is technically right between Astoria and Sunnyside. There's a Home Depot that's right next to this like Best Buy and stuff. They have a Rocco's, which is basically a food truck outside of the Home Depot, which is the sister location to the Rocco's at a Home Depot in South Philly.
Okay.
And they bring in all the stuff, and they make pretty authentic cheesesteaks there
Outside of Home Depot.
outside of Home Depot in Queens.
Like, would you have ever?
No, I mean that's the most New York thing ever, though. It's like, oh, well,
Where's
the best Philly
cheesesteak?
cheesesteak you could get is outside of this Home Depot.
I love New York. You're always learning some new. There's no, I feel like, place like that in Columbus where you're like, oh yeah, you go out the Lowe's and then there's this great food. But
How much of a culture shock did you have going from the Midwest to like moving into essentially the heart of Philly? What year was this that you were?
This would have been 2003, 2004. Yeah. There was a bit of a shock because I'd already visited it before and I'd been to like Chicago and stuff. So I kind of understood what the kind of big cities were. But what I liked about Philly was it was very walkable.
Mm-hmm.
Like you didn't have to deal with public transit too much. Everything was like within a small area. And so it wasn't too much of a shock. I think where it became a shock was like at night and the nightlife and like how crazy it got. But I always loved it. I mean, when I was a kid and I went to Chicago, that was the first time I was like, oh, I can just like walk downstairs and get a slice of pizza. This is the best place in the, From that point on, I was like, I got to live in a big city. It's like that the amenities that you get within walking distance are so great.
That's definitely one of the things that I think that's the hardest for me anytime I go to even a city that's not New York.
LA?
Yeah, like I don't like LA because it's all so slow and so far away from each other. Like I love, we have a car, but basically only have a car to go out of the city. I just love that on any given week, I will never have to step foot inside of a car if I don't want to.
Yeah.
And like anything that I want is really within a 15-minute walk unless I'm being really picky. And like to me, that's especially I grew up in Jersey, but also like in a very, very like densely packed suburban area where you could drive anywhere in 15 minutes. And so like would go and visit my cousins in Vermont or something. And they're like, yeah, the closest mall is an hour away.
Yeah.
It's like, I couldn't live like that. I couldn't do it.
I feel like that's why people in LA live in like Los Feliz and like Silver Lake because they're all like kind of these little pockets of walkable areas. When I lived in LA very briefly for about, I don't know, 8 to 10 months. And I lived in Burbank and worked in Glendale. And both of those are kind of like little pockets. But yeah.
Miss LA at all?
Yeah, I thought LA is such an interesting town creatively because especially when you work in like the animation and television industry, there's no other city you go to where everybody understands what you do. And so there's like something very welcoming about that town. And there's also like everyone there is like pushing themselves creatively all the time because it's so competitive that you go to things that are like drink and draw events and like go to all these, animation hangouts and all these things. It's very creatively exciting. And I remember being very like, I walked away from it being like, man, everyone there is like making awesome stuff. This is really cool.
I like NFT LA. We get like our week dose
Yeah.
of LA, and then it's like, all right, like we can come back next year.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
not like living, because we normally will get a place up in the hills,
Yeah.
and then it's like you're kind of far from everything else, but you can get people to come to you, and it's nice. But like if you can't get people to come to you, like I don't want to go take an hour-long Uber
Yeah.
somewhere else, and that's how it feels like here.
It is a hike, yeah.
The Ubers are long, but you can at least take the train or like
Mm-hmm.
walk, which is new to me. Like I still am not confident in my train skills. It's like I like that the phone app, you just Apple Pay. I remember being a kid in the city and like having to put the money in and get my card and like, all right, this is my Path train card, so I can go back to my aunt's house in Hoboken. And it's like now at least works on your phone.
And it was fucking awful too, especially those goddamn Path train stops. Half the machines are broken. Sometimes none of them work, and you're just putting your card in. I've had so many times going back to Jersey where I just ended up hopping the turnstile.
Yeah, because the
I'm
card
like,
won't take. It's just giving you a red thing. You're like, what the fuck?
Yeah, and I was living and commuting in the city, and you would get the like monthly pass, and the monthly pass doesn't fucking pay to go to Hoboken, and so I was just like, I'm not going to pay again to do this, and so I've hopped those turnstiles many times.
Yeah, I can totally relate. The first year I lived in New York, I lived in the Jersey City Heights, which is like there's Hoboken, and then there's this big giant hill back behind it, and up there's like a neighborhood that was like again I was right out of art school, and it was like the cheapest area you could live in New York that was like commutable, it was kind of wild because at a certain point the Path train just stops running at night, and if you miss it, you're like, I'm just going to sit on the track now for an hour. It's terrible. But yeah, it was like you just commute through to Williamsburg and then you commute back at night. But I don't know if I'd move back there again. Though I've heard some people have started moving back to like Jersey City and stuff.
That's where he's at. He's in Jersey City.
Yeah.
Where are you holding it down right now?
Now I'm up in Westchester. I lived for many, many years in Sunnyside, Queens. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, my wife and I moved up to Westchester to get more space. And then like a few weeks later, like the pandemic happened. And I was like, oh man, we made timed it perfectly.
That's the way it goes.
Yeah.
So going back a little bit to the first job out of college.
Yes.
How did you transition out of that job? You said it for a couple of years. What happened next?
Well, during that time, you do all these side projects, and you just build up a network of freelance. In my evenings while I was working there, I was working on this HBO cartoon called The Life and Times of Tim. Mm-hmm. And then when that show got another season, that was why they flew me out to LA to go work on that. And that kind of expanded, my network and the animation side of things. Throughout that time, I was working at like post houses that would do like toy commercials for Hasbro and all these things. And eventually I went over to like MTV and I worked on some shows called Girl Code and Guy Code, which is like basically comedians make a bunch of jokes and you just illustrate the jokes, which then ended up kind of evolving into what I do in Brooklyn, which is a live comedy show where I live draw to stand-up comedy. But yeah, so I worked at MTV, and then from there I jumped over to the NBC shows. I worked on late night with Jimmy Fallon, which then became The Tonight Show a year later. And then like a year later after that, I started joining in on the SNL VFX team. And so I was working basically 6 shows a week on NBC shows, doing comedy for 8 years.
And so did you know, like, as you were going to art school, was part of what you wanted to do always comedic? Or did that kind of like serendipitously happen, or you kind of found that after the fact?
I was always a fan. When I was in college, I did an internship on a show called Bryan Brinkman, which was like this MTV kind of subversive Muppet show for adults.
Okay.
And I got a real kick out of working on that. And through that, then when I moved up to New York, I started going to a lot of like comedy shows. Mm-hmm. Like down the street is like Pianos from here. And like I used to go to a lot of like, it was like a Kristen Shaw and Kurt Braunohler show called Hot Tub Variety. And you just got exposed to all these amazing comedians. And then through that, you just start working on all these kind of comedy shows. So yeah, just kind of, I've always been a fan of comedy. I didn't necessarily think my career would take that turn, but I think sometimes like the intentions you put out there kind of come around. And so if you like become a fan of something to a certain degree, it's a lot easier to enter that world.
Yeah, totally. What's your what's your favorite kind of genre of comedy in general, or do you have any particular things that really just kind of give you a kick?
Yeah, I don't know. I think what they call like alternative comedy, which is like Brooklyn comedy versus like The Cellar. I kind of like that kind of weird stuff, like Reggie Watts and Kristen Shaw and stuff like that. But yeah, I think it's all pretty interesting. Yeah, I'm not too big on improv. Hopefully, no one's offended by that. But I like structured comedy.
Yeah.
I like sketch shows.
My favorite show ever basically is I Think You Should Leave.
Yeah,
And that one it is
It's
like
amazing.
decently improv-ish,
Yeah.
but sketchy and
yeah. Well, it's like I grew up like similarly like Mr. Show, The Wise Kids You Know. You know, I'm forgetting a whole bunch right now, but like I love that kind of written sketch show. The State was a really good one. And so like I think that kind of like subconsciously buried itself in my head. And so I'm always kind of a fan of that kind of performative written comedy versus improvisational, which when I watch improv comedy, I'm constantly thinking about why they're doing what they're doing, and it takes me out of it. Because I'm like, why did they make this choice to leap over here? And so then I just overthink it, and it takes me out of the moment.
that makes sense. Yeah. I've always liked, especially with sketch stuff that like is absurdist.
Yeah.
I feel like that's kind of my like favorite genre of sketch with like Tim and Eric and things like that, where it's
Tim and
like
Eric,
you see a sketch that starts out and you're like, oh, this is a silly premise. This is kind of funny. And then like they always push it one step further into something you don't expect.
Yeah.
And you like can understand how they kind of got their brain to be like, oh, what if this toilet commercial turned into this thing or whatever? But like, I never would have thought of that.
Yeah.
I've always enjoyed stuff like that.
Yeah. I've always, a lot of people are like, well, why don't you take comedy classes? And I'm just like, I don't have the self-esteem. I don't have the self-esteem to just bomb for 8 years straight before you like get good and appreciated. Like that would crush me. I can't do it. But the comedy show I do is pretty fun because it's like you get paired with a comedian and they tell a stand-up joke and we project the drawings behind them. And then you just kind of improvisational doodle and try to elevate the jokes visually.
That's really fun.
So that's like a fun way to like do comedy without the crushing defeat of being a comedian.
And where is that?
We do that at Union Hall in Brooklyn.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
And sometimes we do it like Bell House and Littlefield and stuff, but it's been fun.
Are you normally paired with a new comedian each time, or do you have a few that like you cycle through?
Sometimes I get paired with the host, which is usually a repetitive, but usually they pair me with the headliner or someone that's like more improvisational. That's like, because sometimes comedians will go, okay, here's my set, and they know their set front to back. And then once you get these comedians that are much more like mature and confident, they're like, I'm just going to wing it and see what works with the crowd and kind of roll with it and kind of do that thing. Yeah. And so they can like, they have prepared ideas, but they can like pivot. And so usually they pair me with those people since there's no way to prepare ahead of time.
Yeah, got to be fluid.
Yeah.
Have you ever read the book Impro by Keith Johnstone?
No.
Have you ever heard of it? Excellent book.
Yeah.
I think it's less than 150 pages, but it breaks down a lot of like improv thinking, and it's from a guy who taught improv.
Interesting.
But I think he wrote it in like the 80s.
Oh,
but,
interesting.
yeah, definitely.
Everybody out here swears by UCB, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I like to listen to the Smartless podcast, and that it's Jason Bateman, Will Arnett, and Sean. Don't remember his last name from Will and Grace, and they like they always talk about all the different like because they all met each other in SNL and all these different places, and they have on a lot of their like former like co-stars and stuff. And like they always are talking about like the good old days of improv and all that. It's so like as someone who has no connection to any of that world, hearing them like talk about the good old days of like UCB and all these places in Chicago and stuff, it's like it sounds like a really fun and interesting world.
It makes sense because what I've noticed is when you go to an improv show, usually 50% of the audience is other improv people that are in other groups that are like supportive. So it's a very like close knit,
sounds a lot like
supportive group.
NFTs.
It's very much so.
Is drawing the kind of improv comedy and doing all that. Was that your idea? Was it someone else's idea?
It started out in LA, and the artist that did it out there was my friend Mike, who was my boss on The Life and Times of Tim. And so when they wanted to bring it from LA to New York, he was like, Bryan could do that. And so they reached out to me and they're like, hey, do you want to help run the New York one? So I was like booking the artist, I was setting up the tech, and I was kind of running the shows remotely. And so I did that for a long time. I've recently kind of started to hand off that role to other people, but I did that for probably 6 years.
Nice. Yeah, I think it's interesting. There's a totally different kind of genre. What is the name of it? There was a Netflix show recently where it was like drawing over podcast episodes. It's going to kill me that I can't remember the name of this right now. But it was really interesting. Like I find that kind of like that form of art very interesting, where you're like trying to animate something that is not like originally made to be animated. It is not a script that you are drawing for or like creating for, but it's just like taking whatever stream of consciousness and turning it into artwork. I think that's like a really interesting kind of field.
Yeah, I like it. There's been a few. There's a show way back in the day called Shorties Watching Shorties that did that. And then like I said, like Guy Code and Girl Code, that was kind of the same thing.
Bother me.
Where you watch these comedians tell jokes, and then you hear them say, "Oh, this thing." You go, I think I can draw a diagram that illustrates that in a funny way, and then we can throw a bunch of like gags in the diagram and stuff. And so it's fun to be in that kind of position where you can elevate jokes and be kind of a semi-writer.
Are there like any recordings of these? Like, could people go on YouTube and find
I think so.
some
Yeah,
of these?
yeah. If you
I've-
look up
I've
picture
never
this
seen
comedy,
one of these, but I'm pretty curious.
I
to
will
see
say. It's much better live.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's very
because
ephemeral.
it's very in the moment and responsive, and there's like a tension that happens live.
I need to get
because
one
you
of these
don't know
live
what's
shows.
going to happen.
Yeah. How often do you do them? I'd love to come. All
We usually do them on a monthly basis. I think the next one I'm going to do is in March.
right, let me know. I'll come.
Yeah.
Hopefully,
It's
I'll
called
be
the
back.
Midnight Gospel, by the way. Is the name.
Oh, I love Midnight Gospel. Yeah. Yeah.
Really, really cool. So
That's
The artists behind that do the Picture This in LA.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Mike Mayfield and
Yeah, that's Duncan Trussell, his podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've ever talked to Pop Wonder about it because Pop was on Duncan Trussell's pod.
Oh yeah. Yeah, their styles really match.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to see. Like I learned about Duncan through Joe Rogan. It's like how I learned about a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then to see like Duncan's own pod and then looking at Pop, we're like, it's such a mind fuck. Like how close
The
we
worlds
all are.
combined.
Yeah,
Like the world is so small. There's like millions of people in New York City, but it still feels like so small.
Yeah. Well, it's like in an example like that, it's like you're 3 degrees of separation away from Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
Because of like these different podcasts that you've had. Like you posted Pop was on Duncan, Duncan was on.
It's kind of a mind fuck. I bet you feel that way going through all the TV stuff. It's like you probably brush shoulders with thousands of.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird connections. For some reason, Joe Rogan follows me on Twitter. He's never reached out. He's never said anything.
He's waiting to
He
buy
just
the right
follows me.
NFT.
Like, I really thought he was like researching NFTs at one point. And I was like, why does he follow me?
Yeah, I feel like I've had that. I'm sure you have like a lot of just like very
Hit me up,
random
Joe.
people.
What?
My favorite experience that I had Eric Andre follows me on Twitter.
Oh, nice.
He like did something small with NFT or like was dabbling at one point, but like he DM'd me on Twitter one day like totally out of the blue, and I responded and he never answered me. And that is like my only ever experience with
It's
him.
very Eric Andre
Yeah,
experience.
yeah.
I think his show is one of my favorite shows.
Oh yeah,
Like that's my humor. That kind of absurd craziness.
yeah. The ones where he's interviewing the like Instagram models. Have you ever seen those ones?
Yeah.
Yeah, those are really good.
My wife can't handle that show. She's like, this show is too aggressive for me.
Yeah, Mrs. D's doesn't like it either.
Yeah,
I've-
not this Sally.
Mrs. D's won't last 5 minutes in, and she's like, "What the fuck are we doing?" And I'm like, "You don't think this is funny?" And she's like, "No." Put on Crime Junkies. Like, I need to hear more horror stories. But going through the TV, like, man, I didn't realize how much time I guess you spent there. That was like, you said 8 years.
Well, yeah, I got
at
out of
NBC?
college in 2007, so now I've been out of in the professional world for like 15 years
Yeah.
or so. But I guess 13 to 14 before I left to do NFTs full time.
So how did you get into NFTs?
Well, our mutual friend of ours, Killer Acid.
Yeah.
I've known him in the New York area because he used to sell stuff at these things called MoCA, which is the Museum of Comic and Something Arts, where they get a bunch of indie comic artists. You go and you set up a little table, like a little mini Comic-Con, and you sell screen prints and stuff. And so I would go to those every year, and I'd buy screen prints from artists I thought were cool. And so I collected one of his screen prints, and then from that I followed him on Instagram. I went and bought one of his paintings at one point. Had some of his like weird pins and stuff.
Yeah, his pins are
because I think his art's awesome. And so then it was about December 2019. I saw him. He was like, "Hey, I have this new animated GIF available on Super Rare. It's for 1 ETH or something." And I was like, I don't know what that 3-line symbol is. I don't.
It's like an equal sign, but then there's a third one.
I was like, what are people buying here? What is it? Like? I was so confused, but I was like, this is really interesting because like I thought he was always doing awesome stuff, and I was like, whoa, you can actually like sell animated GIFs and people are actually collecting these. This is really interesting. And I was like, this could be like the next Tumblr where like all these artists kind of filter into this space and make content for it. And so I kind of spent a few weeks trying to find information about NFTs, which was not easy around that time. Most of what I learned during that time was from talking to other artists after I joined. But I put together a video, sent it to Super Rare, and I was like, here's 3 pieces I've made that are GIFs that I think might be fun. And I got on, and I minted my first in February 2020. Right?
That's like hella OG.
That's early.
In my head, there's like from January 2020 to September 2020 is like 5 crypto years. Like if you minted in January 2020, it feels like you minted like 5 years earlier than if you minted in like Q4.
I'm so jealous because what Super Rare eventually they gave out this like OG POAP
for the people before 2020.
There was like it was like I was like
you were like a couple
1 month off.
I love the Super Rare POAPs like your top 100 collector. Like I have the one you made.
Wait, I didn't make one.
Did you not make one?
I don't think so.
Okay, holy shit. Let me pull out my phone here and make sure I'm not sure.
I'll make one sometime.
I know I have killer acids, but there's been months where I don't get them, and I'm like, I need to collect just to get the badge so that
you might have the Sarah Zucker one. That one's got some rainbows on it.
I'm an idiot. So just disregard that. Just cut that.
I want to see what you got.
My mystery.
I think I have 5 badges now. Look, you get some of those. I just got Tommy Wilson's like a month or 2 ago.
So Ryan Koopman's was the first one I got, I think. That Super Rare 2020
I got that one,
and it was like if you just collected, I think he's
like blown up since then too.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
If you just collected any during that time, you got it. But then there were other months where they started doing them monthly.
Yes.
And
I think they do it every month, yeah.
Yeah, I think the first one I got was the Killer Acid one in January.
Oh, that was cool, yeah.
And then there were like, a couple months there was a Yasnir.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're damn near like a 101 art.
Yeah. I love them. I've moved all of them to mainnet and put them in my vault.
I miss the days when that was free. I have a big gripe with it.
I feel like Deez mentions the 0.1 bridging fee like every day now.
It does make you question whether it's worth moving, which I think is a good move.
Yeah.
I know Patricia was so worried about it for a long time. But
I wish I would have migrated them. If I knew it was going to be paid, I would have migrated them all before.
Yeah.
Because now I have like 100. I'm like, that's 10 ETH. Like for me to have my things again, I don't know.
Yeah, but they're not going anywhere.
No.
I think it's so interesting to see like what POAPs flip, because almost none should, but some do. Xcopy, Grant Yunes have recently started those like super rare ones have started flipping.
Yeah,
and it's the OpenSea page for POAP is so poorly manageable that like it's super hard to find anything. I think it's really like it's very funny.
You're just digging through the properties.
Yeah.
And trying to...
It's like this date maybe is where everything is.
And you can't even search the name.
Yeah.
Like if you search the artist, it doesn't show up, right? Yeah.
One of my favorite POAPs is the Gremplin one where he did the Justin Aversano twin.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That one I migrated because I was like, this is a great piece.
The Xcopy one where it was at the Decentraland event was one of the first ones where it was like, oh, you can have an event in a open metaverse and then have this POAP to kind of symbolize that you were there. And like at the time I didn't think anything about it, but I like it now. Yeah. Because it's like proof.
It is proof.
Like, I was there in 2020.
You can cut this, but I sold mine like a year ago.
Hey man. You got it.
People were paying an ETH for a POAP. I was like,
okay. Yeah, you got to secure the bag sometimes.
I mean, you probably could have just bought it Max Payne. You could sell the POAP, get a Max Payne.
Yeah, that's true.
That's probably not...
Well, it's like I already have a couple copy pieces, so I was like, I don't need this piece. But
so find Killer Acid. You're minting on Super Rare. Got the first mint in very early 2020. What happened after that?
From that point on, I was still working full time at 2 jobs. Then a month later, kind of the pandemic hit, And it was like, oh, well, I don't have to commute into the city anymore. I can work in the mornings and my evenings from home. Essentially, I was working from home all the time anyways, but I had like all this extra time now that I was able to kind of just work on these art pieces. And so then, especially, I think a lot of us, when the pandemic hit, you start to reevaluate your time. And you're like, what am I going to do with all this like extra time? Because I have no social life. And so I was like, oh, well, I want to learn new technology. I want to learn more 3D. I want to do all these different things. And so then my super rare pieces became kind of a way for me to like learn new things. So you can see like each one's like experimenting in different directions style wise, but trying to keep them all kind of cohesive. And so during that time, I would say like a month or two later, Pranksy gave me a plot of land in cryptovoxels, and I got really deep into like learning cryptovoxels and how to build in that.
Yeah.
And so I spent a few months like building this like candy shop that was part of his like district alongside like Hackatow and A Lot of Money and Coldy and Giselle Flores and all these people. And I got to like kind of connect with all these artists like like Sarah Zucker and all these people. And like through that, I became kind of embedded into this awesome community of like OG artists that kind of like I learned a lot from, like watching how they worked. And everyone was so, it was a very small space. So everyone was very giving with advice and time and all this stuff. Is like when I talked to Josie early on, I like picked her brain for like an hour on like how to go about like pairing physical work with digital work and all this stuff. And so it's like it was a very fun time of just like massive amounts of like learning from each other. And then that put me in a position that by the time the summer had ended and things started to pick up, a collector or an artist named Dikaitza put together a Nifty Gateway drop and put me on Nifty Gateway. And so then I was like, because before that I was just doing kind of like all one of ones. And then there was that like kind of Rarible moment where everyone was farming
It's
Rari.
August and September of 2020.
Yeah. So everyone was like, we got to do editions of 10 to get some Rari tokens, because it was like basically like
free money.
Yeah, it's free money.
It was like you're getting like 10 or 20% more just because like if you sold it for 10 ETH on Rarible, you were getting another 1 to 2 ETH and Rari tokens to dump. Yeah. And it was a no-brainer. It went on for a couple months.
That was such a crazy time, because there was like a very real period of time where like it was more popular than OpenSea.
Yeah.
I bought my first NFT off Rarible. Really? It was a Pepe. Yeah. It was
oh, really?
This artist at the time, his name Very Rare Pepe.
Yeah.
And he was just making like editions of 5 and 10 and 20.
I like that stuff. They're very funny.
And then he put out physical paintings on Rarible, and I bought both of them. They're like half an ETH, and I told my wife, at the time that was like $200, half an ETH, and I was like, "This is awesome!" Like I have an NFT, but we have the painting up on the wall now. And then I bought both, so they were like 2 Pepes holding coins, but one is like a unicorn holding a Rari coin, and the other is just a very normal Pepe holding a Bitcoin. But it was like, wow, he's putting art, and he's like a Polish artist. He's sending me videos of the painting. He's like, this one, he told me I had to like put, I forget, on oil painting, you have to put something over it to like make the oil glossy and like stay. I don't know what. He basically like told me like, yeah, on this one painting, like you probably want to add this thing to it. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep it exactly how you gave it to me. Yeah. But the fact that this Polish artist would ship something from Poland to Ohio, I mean, I thought that was so cool. And that was before I knew what OpenSea was.
That reminds me of, at the time there was only one NFT influencer, and it was this guy named Surge, Power Surge. And he would always show the Very Rare Pepes, and he would just collect them all. And that was like, that was like the beginning of me realizing that there was this whole Pepe subculture to everything.
I never collected. I knew in 2017 when I joined about rare Pepes, because I read an article about a guy who made $1 million like living on his boat, trading rare Pepes and Pepe Cash, and I was like, what the fuck is all this? I kind of just blocked it out of my mind in 2017 because I didn't understand it, and I was more focused on just using a centralized exchange.
I had a similar thing where my wife was like, you got to check out this CryptoKitties thing. People are paying a lot for these glitched out kitties. And I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, I'm going to do that. And I tried to set up a wallet, and I could not figure out how to get funds into it. And I was just like, I don't feel comfortable giving my credit cards to these like weird sites like Mt. Gox and stuff. And I was like, I don't know. And so in retrospect, I probably missed out.
You probably maybe hopefully would have fell into punks.
Yeah,
that was
well, I probably would have lost all my money in the Mount Gox hack or whatever. So it's like, and I always look at them like, well, that's the only one I knew about, and everybody lost their money, so I wouldn't be any better off.
So is your wife big into crypto then as well? If she was telling you about crypto kitties in 2017?
I don't know. No, not at all. She has a wallet and she collects a few things, but yeah, she's mostly stays out of it. But I think she just thought it was like, she knows I like to collect things, and she's like, no, this is like a really weird, cool thing. But yeah, I think, well, we love cats, so I think she was like, we should try and get one of these crypto kitties because they're cool and they're digital cats.
Do you have pet cats?
We have 2 cats, yeah.
So do I.
Nice.
We love cats. We're a big cat pod here.
Yeah.
I got cat.
There's
cats.
some cats hidden in here somewhere.
When we had Gossamer on our
Yeah.
podcast, we talked for like an hour about cats. it was great.
One thing you talked about early on is making things cohesive, but still experimenting. When I think of you and cohesion, I think of what you're wearing. I think of these very specific blue, red, yellow, and green colors, and it's a
Yes.
very specific Brinkman palette. To the point where other artists create like the democracy that I always mispronounce, but like it has a Brinkman palette.
Yeah.
Or like there's people who take the palette and then attribute it to their art. How did you come up with this palette, and how has it evolved? Because I feel like since I've known you since Nimbuds, basically, that palette is just like you.
So there is a logic behind it, and what it is like before NFTs, I was doing a lot of these kind of pop culture gallery shows out in LA. There's like Gallery 1988, and there's like Bottleneck in New York, and you do these kind of like Rick and Morty art shows, or Monty Python art shows, and you make these like kind of high-end fan art pieces. When I joined the space, I was like, I don't want to bring that into the space because, one, there's probably legal issues with selling this stuff, and two, it's not my idea. I'm like just making work based on other people's ideas. So I wanted to start kind of fresh with the NFT space and push animation and color because, I looked at Super Rare at the time, and it was Coldy, it was a lot of money, it was X-Copy, and they were all kind of these like earthy, glitchy, dark things.
Yeah.
The only person that was probably doing it around that time was probably Joy.
Yeah.
That was doing like kind of bright, colorful stuff. But he was like, I wasn't aware of his stuff because he was not on Super Rare at the time. He was off doing his own contract stuff because he's like super brilliant. But I was like, oh, well, everyone's kind of doing this. I think I can I don't see anybody doing traditional animation stuff. I don't see anybody really doing like pop, colorful stuff. Maybe I could play in that world. And so my first piece was called Explode, and it was these kind of clouds exploding with these colors. And it was, back then you could only do animated GIFs, which was like a fun challenge of the space. But so I started with that, and then I kind of tried a few things to see what I kind of enjoyed. And I came back to those colors because I figured, when you're in the traditional world, there's this expectation that when you do a show that you create a piece of art that looks just like what you're known for. And everybody wants you to make like repetitions on whatever's your most successful thing. And I've always found that to be like very creatively stunting. And so I was like, well, if I use these colors, I can then do a 3D piece. I can then do a generative piece. I can then do, a 2D animated piece. And they don't have to look at all the same stylistically, but if they have those colors, it brings it all together. And so I use the colors as well as these symbols that you see in the shirt, which is like clouds, wires, diamonds, things that I kind of made symbols of things in the space. So it was like the diamond is like, how we value things, and the wires are how we're connected to each other. And it was like, I could tell these, like, I could create these little dioramas that told diary stories of how I felt about the space and kind of build up the symbols slowly and create kind of a language around my art. And so that was kind of the idea around it. And now it's like, it's kind of funny because I was like, oh, I'll do colors. That way I don't have to do the same style over and over. And now it's like, the colors are my style.
The colors are your style. So the colors, you picked 3 shades of the primary colors.
Yes.
And then you picked green.
Yeah.
So what is like the color?
At the very beginning, there was another color. There was a red and a pink, which I've kind of phased out the pink because it was just kind of, it didn't
It's
need
kind of
it.
like repetition.
Yeah.
So how did you pick out, like, what's the color theory behind them? Because I love the color. It's very playful. It's not hard. It's like a softer color, and it's bright.
Yeah, I think part of it is I wanted them to be this kind of pastel-y, Eastery kind of candy-coated color, while also being this kind of vibrant neon feel to it as well. And so that kind of steered the direction on them. They've kind of shifted a little over time, but they mostly keep the same dynamic. But yeah, I think when it came down to it, I was like, oh, well, I want people to look at this and automatically feel kind of like disarmed by the warmth of it versus like coming at them with like psychedelic craziness too much. So yeah, I think that just played into this idea of like, well, if I'm going to make pop art, it should be like the most happy, fun colors possible. And I can use that to kind of candy coat ideas about like my feelings on the space that might not be all positive, you know?
Yes.
But then people that don't want to look at the description and see what it's actually about will say, oh, that's a really satisfying, colorful, fun piece of art, you know? So it's kind of, it's a veneer.
So then kind of going from there, I want to talk a bit about your generative art stuff.
Mm-hmm.
How long after you started, I guess, did you already have experience doing stuff kind of in that world prior to art blocks and like scripting generative arty stuff? Or did you learn all of that for art blocks, and kind of what was that process like? When did you start thinking about that?
Yeah. So prior to art blocks, a lot of my work had played around with particle systems, which is a generative form that works within software, whether it's 3D or 2D, where you can kind of generate these like point clouds and make them animated. You see it in like this is done with particles. So I made a bunch of illustrations and it just automates the whole thing.
Okay.
And so I'd been doing that for years, and I really love that because there's a sense of randomness to it that you get to like kind of like same thing. I have a big obsession with watching like physics simulations where you just like see things collapse and how the computer figures out how it works. And so I've always been a fan of that, but I don't have a deep coding background. And so what happened was my buddy Matthew Farrick, who's a producer at Nifty, was like, posted an early art blocks project that was these like pie charts that were like a grid of pie charts.
Dynamic slices.
Yeah, those are sick.
And you could move your mouse and change how they looked. And that was when I was like, oh man, this is on-chain. Because my first collector, Jimmy.eth, was a huge on-chain maxi.
Yeah.
So
but that's awesome that your first collector was Jimmy. That's like a pretty good first collector.
Yeah, it's some good signal right there.
I think he's still maybe my biggest super rare holder.
That's awesome. Shout out, Jimmy.
Yeah, Jimmy's best. But he'd created Avastars, yeah. I keep getting I did a project later on that had a similar name, and I always get them confused. But he did that on-chain project, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. And then he was trying to build like this on-chain platform as well for a while that I think eventually became like the VFriends platform. But when I saw art blocks, I was like, oh, this ticks a lot of different boxes. It's random, it's on-chain, it's interactive, it can be animated. And so I went to my buddy Manny, who I worked with at SNL in the VFX department, because he had been scripting stuff for like visual effects programs so that we could like get all this stuff to air faster. So we would create like shortcut like plugins to like automate processes. And so he was really starting to get into coding and getting really excited about it. I was like, I'd spent like 8 months being like, you got to get into NFTs, man. This is so cool. And he's like, I don't want to do that. But when I showed him art blocks, he was like, oh, this is cool because this is code and people are treating code like art. And so I was like, okay, I think we can figure something out. And so then I think we looked at my previous Nifty Gateway drop, which was called the Cloudy Collection, which had, took the strings ideas from my early super rare stuff, put it with some clouds. And there was another artist named Lux Pre who did a drop that kind of took his super rare work and made it into an art blocks collection. And so I was like, oh, that's really interesting of like, how could I automate my drop to make something unique? And then it's just a matter of like, neither of us have generative art backgrounds. So we're like, oh, we can automate a cluster of white circles. And then we can automate a circle that does this. And we can automate a line that bends this way. And so it was a lot of just like us learning as we went. The whole face concept came at the very end when we're like, how do we make this more diverse so that there can be more outputs? Because originally I was going to put like text or like some like ASCII faces. Originally, at one point it was going to look a lot like chain faces. And then I sent it to Pranksy and he's like, that looks just like chain faces. You can't do that. And I was like, what's chain faces? And Nate was super cool about it. He's like, yeah, if you want to do it, we can like collaborate and put chain faces in there. And I was like, Manny was like, I think we could build something else. And so that's how it formed. It was just very organic. And then we made like kind of a prototype. I reached out to Snowfro, and he was like, I love this. Can we put it on the website in like 2 weeks? And I was like, okay.
Wow. So like now the art box curation process is a lot
This
different.
is before there was a board.
This was like season 1.
Yeah, this
was
is
it drop 7, 6?
It was the 10th drop.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
came right after Singularity.
yeah. Singularity would drop on January 1st, and it changed my life.
I was secretly jealous because Singularity was the first vanilla JavaScript drop. And it dropped right before us. Otherwise, we would have been the first. There's especially those early art blocks. It was a lot of like, who could be the first to do something,
right?
And so,
like, we had unigrids with the audio. It was like, boom,
first
I got
audio.
the generative audio and like that type of stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, it really, to me, was such a defining time because we didn't know what the fuck we were doing, minting all that stuff. We were just like, this is fun. We get to talk to everybody. Stuff's cheap. Like, it was affordable. I think, did Nimbuds mean at like 0.1 or 0.2?
it was 0.2, which I think was like 200 at the time.
And they minted quick.
And how many are there in the collection again?
There's 400,
Okay.
They
I knew it was
out,
small.
Meant it out in like 5 minutes. Cause it was like, because even then, I was a notable name coming over to Art Blocks, which was all these just on-chain code maxis and like some CryptoPunks people that knew Snowfro. And so I think they were like, oh, we got a nifty gateway artist doing Art Blocks now. But it's really interesting. Like thinking about like 2 years ago when I made it, I wasn't thinking about PFPs, even though Jimmy had done his project. I saw it as more like a toy box, like if you go to like Kid Robot and you buy a blind box toy, and that's why if you click them, it puts them in the box. Because I was like, oh, these are generative, unique toys.
Yes.
But then a couple weeks later, like it was like Hashmax came out. And then a couple weeks later, Bored Apes came out and all this stuff. And then it just became this like generative character frenzy. And I was like, oh man, I didn't even think about people using these as PFPs.
And I liked it too because I remember like hitting up Manny because I wanted to get just the face as an emoji. And like, I didn't want to screenshot it. And he's like, oh, here's how you do it in the code. It's like this thing. And paste it in. And it's like just the face. Like I think I have number 29 or I have one that ends in 9, but I have the face in my Discord still.
Oh, really?
And I use it because I know like, oh, if I type in 9, it comes up and it's just the face where he looks like kind of pensive and like, oh fuck, I'm about to get fucked. Like, and I was like, it's the first one.
And I mean, that's very fitting for crypto in a lot of ways.
Like, I'm about to get, it's over. It's like, you look at the price chart, you make that face. Like, it's like, but for me, it was at the time like, holy shit, this is someone who has a lot of success in the traditional world where you're working on these TV shows that I've known my whole life. And now you're coming into this playground where I just like serendipitously found it through Snowfro in the Punks Discord. I was like, this is so awesome. Like, how the fuck do we keep finding all these cool people? And then like, a year later, it's totally different. Or 6 months later, we're doing Dutch auctions. We're doing all sorts of crazy shit.
I had no idea Art Blocks would take off in the way it did.
No, none of us did.
I just was like, I just was drawn to weird projects that I thought were kind of utilizing the technology, and it's like in a way that you couldn't do outside of it. So whether it was like async music or any of these things where it's like, oh, this is a cool thing that can showcase what the tech does. Because that was always the hardest part, is especially the first year, trying to tell people about the technology, and they're like, I don't get it. So to be like, oh, this is a project, and here's why it's interesting. And Art Blocks was like, I think for a lot of people, it was the one that really clicked. Of like, this is really unique, and
it was
pushing
so much
forward.
Better than opening up a pack of baseball cards or anything.
Yeah, because Top Shot predated Art Blocks, so there was that kind of black box.
I know.
And we were talking about Rarible too, which I think Rarible's success played into the Nimbuds because everyone was kind of making these like kind of collectible toy type things on there too.
Yeah, that period of art was so interesting. I remember I still have a very old, speaking of Gremplin earlier, he was making these weird toy looking NFTs.
I remember those. They're like fantasy characters, right?
Yeah, and so I have the first one, and fuck, I don't remember what it's called. I'll have to pull up my OpenSea and check. But it's like Grismo is his name, and it's this like rat looking guy with a knife. And it literally it spins and it looks like a 3D rendered toy, and it has all these like attributes on the side. And it was I remember seeing that on Rarible. And that, like, to me, that's like kind of what I equate with Rarible, is like this really weird and like toy-y kind of stuff felt really popular at that time.
Yeah, because it was like digital collectibles made sense in that way. Yeah, it was it was a strange time where like all these people kind of joined on Rarible, and then yeah, it kind of faded away.
Yeah.
Everyone kind of went off to random other places.
Yeah, I guess kind of going off of that a little bit, as an artist, how do you, let's say you have a new idea for a project, you want to sell it somewhere. What's kind of like your mental checklist of like, where am I going to sell this? What is my like, how do you make that decision? How do you decide Nifty Gateway or Manifold, or it's a super rare one of one, or maybe it's an art blocks thing? Like, what does that look like?
That's a good question. It usually comes down to each website has its own strengths. And so it's when I make a piece of art, when it's a piece of art that I find is very kind of like personal to my feelings, I usually make it a one-of-one on Super Rare, because Super Rare I see is kind of like the diary of my journey and how I feel about things in the space. So if you go, it's like this piece is about me learning about flipping art. This piece is about how gas works. This piece is about PFPs becoming popular or something. So like those are my storytelling about me NFTs. Nifty Gateway is usually where I create these kind of like bigger collections around ideas and kind of like visual ideas, because I'll experiment and I'll find a new visual style, and then I'll kind of create a group around that. Nifty is where I go to make more, I would say, like commercial work. I usually look at like Nifty collectors as like, what would people want to hang on their like dorm room wall versus like what would be in a museum. And so that's usually kind of like the attitude I take towards that, because Nifty, the art is in the drop. Like that's how you do ranked auctions or open editions or all this stuff. Like Nifty is always like pushing the boundaries of how you release art, which I think now is becoming kind of Manifold's taking over that world of interesting drop dynamics. And then there's just like kind of these weirder ones you do. And sometimes people reach out to me and they're like, hey, I got this platform, here's what it does. And then I'll have an idea that fits into it.
Is that like when you did the Shatter piece with
Rich.
Transient? Was that something where you had an idea for something and then found Transient, or did Transient talk to you and say, hey, we have this cool
did
thing?
you talk to Rich before you went?
Rich reached out to me and he's like, hey, do you want to do a collab? And I said, sure. And then I think Dave Krugman did a Shatter thing with his drips. Rich saw it and was like, this is so cool. I know the Transient guys, we could do something like this. And so I was like, okay, that's cool. How do we do that in a way that is different than what Dave did? And so instead of showing all the pieces in the main one, the Shatter revealed a bunch of unique ones.
Yeah.
And so I was like, how do I take that idea but make it not
I know what
Jesus
Jesus is going to say next. Go.
Yeah, but the thing I loved about yours was like, if I bought the 101, I would want to shatter it to get the very bright edition. Like there's one edition that sticks out more than all the other ones.
Yeah.
So I would have like shattered it, put that in my gallery, and then maybe offloaded some of the other ones or something. Like I thought it was pretty unique.
I enjoyed the mystery of how that would play out, because I thought maybe someone would co-buy it with 15 other people and split it up. I thought maybe a DAO would buy it and then like put some in the vault. And in the end, Pac bought it and shattered it and kept it. He's like, I'm never going to flip any of these. I was like, okay, cool. But I think he's going to, I have a feeling he might gift them eventually to certain people.
That's the art that creates other art to me is very interesting.
Yeah.
I'm currently, I have it on the mind. So I'm part of a group who bought Mad Dog Jones's Replicator. And we basically, it's a bunch of people who have all been very busy over the last year and a half. And we really have not done it justice by any means. It's kind of just sat there and it's essentially printed all of its replications.
Yeah.
I don't know what the word is. But it's basically all printed out. All the NFTs exist. And so we finally are like, all right, we really need to do something about this because it's too cool of a piece to just have to be sitting there.
Yeah, the contract's crazy.
Yeah, and so now we're finally today going to distribute to everyone kind of just somewhat pro rata to how much they put in, a randomized here are the different pieces that you get.
Oh, really?
And so I'm really excited to kind of get those out into the world a little bit and start having people shill them, and I'll definitely list at least one of mine on secondary just to start getting it out there, because I know Mad Dog Jones has tried to do things with it here and there with us, and one got auctioned off during Art Basel.
I loved that installation you built.
Yeah, it was really
cool. Really cool.
And so I think that kind of stuff is really interesting. I mean, a lot of that kind of plays into what we're doing at Tessera as well. But different fun ways where art is creating art to me is really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the shatter contract in a way is very similar to like a fractured.
Yeah.
And you made a really good point about how like you as the collector or curator need to do more to make that piece feel like it's getting justice, because like new people in the space probably don't even know what the fuck the replicator is.
Yeah.
Like that was,
and it's one of the
massive,
coolest pieces of art that I think has been made in like
massive auction. And there's people who join the space after it auctioned, and they don't even know it exists. So it's like this curator artist, relationship where, and it's something I've really had to work on, because like a lot of times I was buying art because I liked it. I didn't realize the kind of work that I should do. It's not like I need to, or I feel like there's a gun to my head forcing me to, but like my heart tells me like, you're collecting art from these artists. You need to tell the world why you love the art and show them why you connect with it so much and share those experiences, because without it, you're like not doing those pieces justice. And that kind of leads me to my next question, which is, what do you think is the most underrated piece that you've done? Oh my
gosh. I don't know. What does underrated
underrated
mean?
Would mean like, have you ever put out work that you thought very deeply about, connected a lot with, and then it just didn't get the reception that you might have thought it would have got? Maybe that's a bad question, but
no, I think I know what you mean.
I think it's interesting. I'm just trying to think of what piece do I think is like maybe not getting. I think the recent piece I did with Artifacts that I collaborated with Dirk on, there was this like GLB sculpture of this guy ripped into strings, and there's this 3D piece. I think it got a good reception, but I think like that piece is amazing because I think Dirk is amazing, and I think Artifacts is amazing, and I think in terms of pushing, again, building stuff for the future, that piece is going to be really special. And I think a lot of people just like don't give enough attention to some of these kind of side platforms sometimes.
No, you're 100%.
I think
right.
Artifacts is like a sleeping
giant. So I actually don't really know what Artifacts is. What is it?
So they do collaborations with artists. I'm sure you know every single one they've done, artist-wise, because it's like, Fuck Render and Think UX and, Beige and everybody. You make a one-of-one piece, which gets auctioned, and then they have 100 editions of a GLB that's like a on cyber / Decentraland ready 3D model. And so basically every artist has these like sculptural pieces, which I think are super awesome. They look great and on cyber.
They look beautiful.
And yeah, each one's touched by Dirk. If people don't know who Dirk is, he's the artist that does all the 3D work for Aku. And yeah, his super rare work on itself is amazing work. So I think that whole collection is really amazing. I've been trying to like slowly build up.
I messed up early. Like Redbeard was telling me, he's like, you gotta talk to Roger, you gotta get into this, like he knows what he's doing. And then like I didn't have a pass, so I wasn't getting all of them. I came into it late and I'm like, fuck, these are great. Like I saw a gallery, I think maybe, I don't know if it was yours, you have a couple of them in your gallery.
I have a few, yeah.
But I mean, I saw them around galleries.
Some of them are from like super rare pieces too.
And I bought like Robbie Trevino's was one of my first ones.
Yeah, that one's great, yeah.
I put that up, and once you realize you can scale it and it like doesn't lose any fidelity in your on-cyber gallery, like holy shit, like this is a lot better than like the 2D painting. Yeah. Because now I have like it in the center of the room or in the corner, and it's like I couldn't put a piece in a corner. Yeah. Because it can't bend on the wall, but like there's a whole new way to curate with them.
I'm also a deep believer that like what we're building as assets for the next phase of like how we live our lives, which is like Apple glasses, and like we only have so much wall space, but there's so much like you could put so many sculptures on a table or like in a room, and like there's all these virtual galleries where everyone fills the walls, and then there's just all this empty floor space. And so like building sculptures, I think is I've been saying it for like a year. I really think it's like something all artists should like start to think about, because once AR really takes off, those are going to be what people start to collect, I think.
I think CloneX is the one that was like in my head pushing that a little bit from the creative side. It was like, look at this 3D, and then they bring in a whole slew of new Blender 3D creators through that ecosystem, and then they're all making like custom pods. Like you just see people make like crazy houses.
Those pod like skins.
Yes,
insane.
And then now like on Cyber's made it so that you can upload your own gallery. Like you don't need to go through a curation process and mint an NFT. Like if you build a 3D gallery, you can fucking put it on.
Oh yeah, they just announced that recently, right?
Yeah.
So what exactly was that announcement? I was a bit confused by it. Is that you can sell the gallery that you built?
Oh, I think we might be talking about different.
They just announced some marketplace thing.
I think that you can just sell NFTs directly in the galleries.
Yeah, or sell the whole gallery. But this was before. This was like you could build the actual gallery without needing them to work with you. Like before, there's a guy named Wolfgang who did most of the early on cyber galleries. Some of them are paid, like Genesis and Void. Some of them were free. But eventually, their idea was like, we need to open this up so that like if you want to make a bespoke inverse Guggenheim in the fucking metaverse, and like you can build it and put it up, and it's your own gallery, and you're not relied on like these curated architects. But I think that is great because we're going to see a bunch of crazy one-of-one gallery type stuff get built up.
Yeah.
Last year, it kind of fell through, but I was talking to a architect firm about building a squiggle gallery for my squiggles. And they sent me mock-ups of it. I might have showed it to you a long time ago, but they sent me mock-ups of it, and like it was looking really good, and things fell through, and yeah. But I was thinking at the time, like we could have art blocks themed galleries where it's just like the whole drop. Like you have a Fidenza, and it's like flowing around the gallery is like multiple tiers, and they're all spirals, and you're going upstairs, and they're all on the walls, and it's like I'm so excited to see what that looks like.
6529. I'm saying.
Oh,
Their art blocks on Cyber is very impressive. Those rooms are huge. But yeah, no, I think I look at like when you go to a museum right now, you go and you get a little like iPod that plays audio. I think eventually they'll just give everybody like AR glasses, and like all the art will have like instead of having little white cards next to it, all that supplemental thing will just be augmented around the art.
I can see that in your house where you have like different pieces up, but then like if Brinkman's coming over, maybe I want to put the Gen Start vibe up, or like I want to put some of Nimbuds up. But then like Sam Spratt's coming over, man, I want to put like earthier stuff up. And like instead of having to hang up all the pieces, it's just you have some dashboard where you can be like, and then everyone's Apple AR glasses sync, and you're just able to see a whole new thing. So it's like having your house be an on-cyber gallery, but you can rotate it like through 100 different ones. So like, you're like, today I want the mushroom room. Like tomorrow I want dark glitchy vibes.
I think so. We'll see what the world becomes, but I imagine eventually we'll just stop having TVs and we'll just we'll just see our TVs in our glasses, and it's going to totally change how we design our houses, because right now our houses are very designed based around watching TV.
Yeah.
But eventually we won't need to have a focal point of the room anymore, because anybody can just watch TV wherever they want to watch it. So I think it's gonna be weird.
It's interesting. Yeah, you normally have like the living room. It's set up around that with a long flat wall and like spot above a fireplace just for the TV.
I think it'll be. I don't know. I'm excited about it. I think it's really just a matter of when Apple gets around to putting that thing out.
Yeah, it's like we're kind of waiting for the hardware too to catch up.
Yeah.
Like I think the state of VR right now isn't. It's not. It's better than it was 5 years ago.
Oh, for sure.
But it's still like uncanny, and you still kind of get a headache, and it's not a clear thing. It's like we're waiting for the hardware to get there.
Yeah. It's still way too pricey. And even the things I've been hearing about the new stuff, everyone just talks about the augmented reality aspects. Like, oh, the pass-through camera lets you see all this cool stuff. It's like, yeah, we're almost there.
Have you messed around with any AR stuff?
VR or
AR? AR, VR.
AR. A little bit.
Yeah, AR.
Yeah, I think, well, any of my 3D sculptures can be used in AR, whether it's artifacts or super rare. I've done some experiments that never got released for various reasons. The companies that were going to release them downsized. But there's really cool ways you can kind of augment it. But to me, it's always that's still a gimmick aspect.
Yeah,
it's not very cool. And I think that I'm not anti-gimmicks. I think they're always fun, but you have to like kind of see them for what they are, which is like fun marketing and not like fine art.
Yeah. Did you see the dollar bills or like the killer acid bills he had in Miami?
I did, yeah.
And then the app that you could put.
I haven't seen it in motion yet. He told me on the phone I gotta try it.
It has a whole music and everything. Like you hear. I mean, it's like running water or something, but like you hear it all. It's like a multi-sense experience that comes off just that bill. And that had me thinking, like, you have those up in your house, look at it, and it's just like something.
Oh, I have done some AR stuff with screen prints. Again, going back to those gallery shows I used to do, I did like a Donkey Kong poster, And if you used RT Vibe, it would make the barrels like go down the ramps and stuff. And so there's like fun ways you can do that with like screen prints and stuff. But yeah, so there's some experimenting, but it's still
It's still early.
It's just like it's fun things here and there.
What is like the most fun you've had in NFTs?
Oh man, I think it's the events, the in real life events. I think the hardest part about the NFT space for the first year, or at least 6 to 8 months, was it was all virtual, and there was a lot of fun to be had in crypto voxels, getting together, do these like work in progress meetings and stuff. But then once, I remember one of the first times I got to see people in real life was Artifacts put on this like Times Square show where they got a bunch of screens and they were showing a bunch of artists, and so a bunch of NFT artists, because it was still very much like masked and lockdown, but we were all like outdoors in Times Square, and it was like Sergito was there and Roger was there and Gavin, the guy who does like the Flamingo, Shapiro, he was there, and there was a bunch of just art, Car in 4D, a bunch of artists that I had known and connected with but had never met in real life. And that was when it started to be like, oh, this is real, we're all here, we're all excited about this. And from that point on, then it was like NFT NYC and like all these things happen, and like the more events I go to there, I think that's the most fun I have. It's because, especially as an artist in this space, and I'm sure as a collector too, we're all like in our bubbles outside where nobody really cares. And so when you go to an event and you meet other artists, you can relate on a level that you can't relate to with anybody outside. You can't say like, oh man, I can't believe the market's down and I can't sell NFTs. Nobody cares. But when you go and hang out at like a dinner with an artist, you can have these deeper conversations that you just can't get elsewhere. And I think that's the most fun, is like that deeper connection we get with
New
each
York
other.
is the best city for this too, I think.
Yeah.
Lots of crypto people in New York. It's nice.
Yeah.
It's like 40% of crypto people are in New York.
Yeah. Well, a big shout out to Nick O'Neill, Nifty Nick. He used to throw these dinners.
That was where we first met, I think, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, that one was out.
Like, that was so smart because it brought all the New York NFT people together, and then we all just like connected and became friends after that. And then it's wild to see that he's like created this whole empire out of it, which is really cool to see. But it all started with just a couple people sitting at dinner, meeting each other and like having fun.
That's, I feel like, how a lot of friendships in the space.
Shout
out.
Very much so.
I mean, the people who throw dinners, I feel like we've come around. Originally at NYC, we threw a party. It was great, but it was like, we didn't really get to make friends with anybody, and it was kind of a clusterfuck, and there was like 200 people there.
Yeah.
And ever since then, it's like, we just do dinners or lunches.
Yeah.
And just try to build like more intimate connections with people we already know, rather than just like party, rage, loud music. And it's not what we're here for.
Coldy does a good one at NFT NYC where he rents out this like basement karaoke spot, and all like the OG NFT people go and like hang out in this basement. And that's always like a fun way for like people that haven't seen each other in a while to come.
Do you all do karaoke?
I don't do karaoke.
No.
No.
Who's the best karaoke singer of the group?
I don't know. That's a good question. Coldy's pretty good. Giselle Flores is pretty good. But yeah, it's like, that's where you can see like Art Gnome like getting loose and karaokeing and stuff. So like those are the experiences that I appreciate more. I'm always a fan of like the art focused events. I know it's like I'm biased because I'm an artist, but I'm always a fan of like things that gather a bunch of artists together versus like, say like a PFP party. Though there's been some awesome PFP parties. That first Bored Apes Strokes concert was like insane.
Was that 2021?
No, 2021 NFT NYC, I think.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I've never been to a Bored Apes party,
Okay.
but
That
maybe
one was
one
cool.
day.
Just getting the Strokes in New York is a rare occurrence.
Did you mint apes, or how did you get an ape?
I bought an ape the day it sold out.
Nice.
I went into the Discord and I said, will somebody sell me an ape? And someone said, I'll sell you one for 0.1 ETH. And I said, you got a deal.
Do you,
I still have it.
Wow, nice.
Well, especially because they sold it to me at a small discount. That gives you that guilt that
Yes.
you don't want to sell it. And that like held me through all the FOMO, which is kind of wild. If I had bought like 10 of them, I probably would have sold 9 of them immediately for like half an ETH.
Yeah, I think that was kind of the vibe we've got from a lot of people we talked to.
yeah.
Yeah.
Except one guy who was extremely prescient and had 50 and held them and actually sold the top.
Yeah.
Man, amazing.
But
Good for him. But yeah, no, I think I just bought it because, again, Pranksy and Jimmy bought like 1,000 of them. And I was like, well, they seem to know what they're doing, so I should probably buy one of these.
Man,
So shout out to them.
That was such. I'll never forget it. I'm just like in Punk's Discord. I'm like, what the fuck are these apes? No way they ever flip Punks. Like, they don't look as good as Punks. And then we all know how it went.
I regret not buying Punks because I was in the space early enough where I could have gotten them for like well under an
After
ETH.
the Nimba drop, would have, I think they were like under 7 ETH at the time.
Yeah.
Because I was flipping a lot and they were like 5-ish.
Yeah.
And then Art Block started to take off. And then Top Shot took off. And then the Top Shot people came into Punks. And I was like, oh shit. And then like 2 months later, I think Punks went to Christie's.
Yeah. I remember. I distinctly remember one particular tweet from Mike Demaray of Rainbow, and this was during DeFi summer, and he tweeted out like, "Punks are almost at a 1 ETH floor," and I prior to that had basically only ever touched Top Shot, and as far as NFTs go, and I was like looking at Punks, and I was like, these look cool. But I'm earning yield on my ETH. And so I'm like, I'm farming. I can't farm with Punks. And so I was like, these look cool, but I'm not buying any. I can't farm with these. And little did I know, the best way to farm is to have your asset appreciate 100x over the course of a year.
You don't really need to get 40% APY with your
In a Ponzi,
ETH when
yeah.
you could have got like a...
Yeah. And so I ended up not buying for, I mean, I still bought decently early. Like I think the one that I still use consistently, it was still single digit ETH.
Yeah.
But
that's crazy.
I remember looking when they were like 80.8 ETH or whatever, and I was like, these are cool, but I prefer yield farming. And that was a mistake.
Yeah, well, it was like the first, I would say 6 months, I wasn't making enough to like really collect too hard. I would buy little things here and there. It was once Rarible kind of came around, then I started buying these like low editions at 0.1 ETH. That's where I got like Sarah's work and Alada's work and all that stuff. But and then once like Nifty happened and things started to roll, then I was like, oh, now I have some like spending money. And then I got really deeper into collecting. But I would say it took probably like 9 months before I felt like secure. Because, I joined and ETH was like $200. Mm-hmm. And then it dipped down to like $150. I was like, oh, it's over. I can't have to cash out.
Gotta take my could go to zero.
Yeah. And so, it took a while because I was like always kind of like where you take a little bit out here and there. And so I was never like accumulating a ton of ETH. So, regrettably, I could have had a lot of ETH.
But you were safe. Like, you're like, I'm an
but
artist.
Even my super rare stuff was only selling for like 1 ETH for a 1 of 1, which at the time was like $200 because, we were talking about kind of these like Mad Dog Jones sales earlier. There was a time where like every week there was a new all-time high sale. Mm-hmm. And that happened up until that $69 million Beeple sale that could never be beat. But there was this moment where like everything had a moment. Like Matt Cain broke the $100,000 sale record with one of his pieces. And like everything had this big moment of like breaking records. And so it's really like a lot of people probably just don't understand how like everything was cheap back then because there was just no demand and there was no money flowing around back then. Like I remember when I joined, Pack broke the record for all-time high on Super Rare with like a $5,000 sale. And now it's like every day there's $5,000 sales on the feed like every hour.
So you joined February 2020. Really the like true crypto art appreciator scene probably doesn't really start until sometime in 2021 for the most part. It starts to pick up.
Yeah,
in later
it was mostly
2020.
artists just collecting each other's work.
Did you have periods of time before like stuff really took off where you were like, this is cool, but like maybe I have better ways to spend my time. Maybe there's something else. Or once you kind of got in and did it, were you like, no, you know what? This is sick. I don't care that there's like 5 people here buying our stuff. Like this is the future.
Well, I never saw it as a full-time gig back then. I was just like, oh, this is the new way. And I was like, because I was doing those gallery shows in LA, for instance. And so I would make a physical piece. If you go to my website, you can see they're called 3D cell pieces, where I would make these physical shadow boxes where I painted them like animation cells. It would cost me like $50 to make out of material. It would take me like a week of time, and then I'd have to pay $50 to ship it to LA. and then I would sell it for like $300. The gallery would take 50%, and I was making about $50 margin on them. So I was like, okay, well, with Super Rare,
a week is tough.
yeah. Well, it's like with Super Rare, I was like, oh, I sold this thing for $200. And they're only taking 10%, and there's a secondary royalty. This is way better than the gallery system already. Mm-hmm. And so at that point, I was like, I'm shifting away from doing gallery art to NFT art because it was much more artist focused, and it was also, you know, I could dictate my own thing. I didn't have to work in their schedule of shows and all this other stuff. I didn't have to ship things to LA. It was all kind of in the control of the artist. And so that's why it like clicked. And I was like, oh, this is going to be my new art side thing. And so I just did that for a year until the point where like I had made enough money from like my Nifty Gateway drops and the Art Blocks drops that I had made a year's salary essentially. And I was like, well, I can try this for a year, see how it goes. If it doesn't go well, I could probably go back and work in TV. But, you know, I have an opportunity to be an artist and do whatever I want, and I can't not take that chance.
Yeah.
And so it worked out. I think there was also this, like, that was also right at the moment where I saw Mad Dog Jones and all these people making like a fortune on Nifty, like a few months after I had made like a $10,000 drop, and I was like, this is awesome, $10,000, hell yeah. And then like all these people were making millions of dollars. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But by the
you
time
were like, wait, there's more?
By the time my next my next Nifty Gateway drop happened, it was like that summer where it was like a small bear market, and it was like everything was dead again, and I was like, oh man.
It's crazy about timing in the NFT space.
Yeah.
Like, if you were one of the Art Blocks artists who just happened to drop art from August, September,
yeah,
like, you got to order a magnitude or 2 orders of magnitude of a different outcome than the people who dropped art 3 to 6 months ago.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like with Nifty, the same thing. If you were in that hotbed of craziness, like, and that's something I don't think people realize in the space, is like timing and luck are very important. And you're somebody who has put themselves in like so many positions, I think, to be lucky, which is like a lesson, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're constantly innovating.
I'm often lucky before the luckiest.
Yeah.
I've never had $1 million drop, but I've been on all the platforms before those $1 million drops.
Or like getting the ape but not selling it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like things like that. But like, you're putting yourself in those positions.
Yes.
I think that's really important. And another thing, just going back to like your early days, I love how open you are to learning new things. Like, I feel like a lot of people come in and are like, I'm an expert at this, I'm gonna only do this, and you were just like, yeah, I'll learn that. Yeah, I'll learn that. Yeah, I'll learn that. And next thing you know, you have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different valuable skills that you can all put together.
Yeah.
And now you have this super unique talent that is only Bryan Brinkman.
Yeah.
But it was because you were so open to experience, and because you were just open, that I think like that really helped. I think I see some people who shoebox themselves too early, and like they don't spread their wings or learn those skills.
It's hard to keep a style popular long term, you know. And I think every artist will go through waves. You know, I had a wave after Art Blocks kind of had that exponential thing that kind of trickled into a lot of my other art in a cool way. But, you know, every artist has ups and downs. And so it's like, how do you prepare for both? And I think what happens is if you're in the space long enough and you get enough experience, then there's a million ways that you can make a living that isn't just pumping your supply out. You can be an advisor on things. You can collaborate and produce other artists' drops. You can play the flipping game and like make money off PFPs and alpha groups and all this stuff. There's a million ways to make a buck in the space that doesn't have to devalue you as an artist. And so I think that's what artists, you know, that'd be my advice to a lot of artists. Like, don't worry about constantly putting out a drop every week. You know, I think there's a cadence to it, but eventually that cadence slows down. When I did Super Rare, I was doing a one of one a week. And then it became every 2 weeks, then it became every month, then it became every 2 months. And now I haven't done like one in months. But I'm putting out one of ones on like charity drops, and like you just kind of put it all over the place. I think I have a cadence of like putting something out every month, but they're always on like random different platforms and different styles. And
like recently the Jumpstart with Adobe for Kids.
Yeah, I'm on it. Yeah,
it's a beautiful 101, but
Thanks.
not on Super Rare.
Yes,
but
yeah, that was on the Moon Pay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like I'm a big fan of doing like random charity drops. That's like the lowest stress for an artist is to do a charity drop because it's like no matter how it doesn't really matter to the artist because we're not getting the money anyway.
And it all goes to charity.
Yeah, it's all good.
Now, this is a totally dumb, random question, but I have no idea. When you do a charity drop, can you write off on your taxes like that as a donation to charity?
That's a great question. As an artist, yes. As a collector, no.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not a donation if you bought, but it is a
if you
donation.
receive an item, you don't get it. There's various ways you can do it. Yeah, I've spent the last year and a half building a platform called ChangeDAO, which is a platform that people can release art and the money directly funnels from the smart contract over to charities, and that way they don't get hit with tax implications. And so that's kind of a cool way to do it because, early on I was doing like, say like Coldy would do this cat charity drop, and it was really fun. But then on paper, I made X amount of money, and then I sent it. I still owe taxes on that primary sale as an artist, and so there's a lot of these like kind of weird things that get in the way, and then you have to kind of like tell your accountant like, well, I don't really have it, and like, will the IRS believe that and stuff. And so I've spent a lot of time trying to like solve those problems for artists, but technically, yes, artists can.
Yeah, that makes sense. My fiance is a tax accountant for crypto, and so that was one I was just curious about. I think that's something that's interesting to me is like there's so much weird nuance in NFT or just in crypto in general that have to do with like taxes and just like the traditional finance world that would never understand where it's like, no, I didn't actually own that. Like I immediately sent it somewhere else. Like I basically didn't own it. And like all of those types of things. It's very funny.
Co-collecting is a pain.
Yeah.
You're like, well, no, like I split this piece 10 ways and all these 3 ETH coming into my wallet. That's not me like getting free ETH airdrops or profiting. That all went to this piece.
Yeah.
Like, oh wait, what do you mean my tax basis on the 30 ETH? Like I only use 3 of my ETH.
Yeah.
Fuck it.
I'm sure you guys have it too, but my accountant sends me like a spreadsheet of like 5,000 line items. He's like, what do all these mean?
That was me last year. I think I spent
doing
about
like Etherscan detective work.
See, that's why you need RKO tax. I'm going to pump my own bags here.
Ooh.
Deez can attest now.
I've signed off my taxes to his wife.
Yeah.
Or,
She's like,
to your friend
so
Ali.
she's like actually the best because her and her partners, they do not do that. They actually understand how to read Etherscan and know what it all means.
Wow.
And so they will do it all for you and then basically give you a finalized thing and say, this is what we have. And if there's something they really don't understand, they'll ask you if you just like
She's
send
making a little list for me because I'm doing some dumb shit.
Yeah, so it's like when you just like when you send ETH to a random address for no reason.
Well, yeah, it is. As a collector, I think it's a lot easier than an artist because the artist we get hit with these like income tax stuff on every sale, and plus there's like Nifty Gateway, which is like an off-chain thing, and you like GUSD, all this other stuff. But there's a level of manualness. But hit me up with that info. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, no, and so like I mean, obviously I'm biased, but I spend a lot of time working with other tax firms as well, and so it's basically like, well, I'm working in crypto full time. She's working at KPMG doing taxes, and I was just like, Allie, I'm using all these platforms, and like I'm telling you, for the people who are making enough money where they'd be willing to pay a like private tax accountant versus like a software like Token Tax or something, like there is no one who is good enough at this. Like, it's all just like boomer crypto, like boomer tax firms who don't understand anything of it. And so I was like, it'll suck for the first year because you won't know what you're doing. And like she's not very technical, but she's very smart. And I was like, but I literally work in the same room as you, and I've been writing smart contracts for 5 years. Like, I can tell you everything you need to know if you have something you don't understand. And so after like that first tax year, just like actually really digging in and learning how Etherscan works, learning how to understand different transactions, whether it's OpenSea or MakerDAO or all these different things, like it's a much better experience to have someone who actually understands that stuff versus just having to explain every single thing.
That's awesome.
To your accountant. Yeah.
And I was spoiled almost all my life because both of my parents are accountants.
Oh wow!
And then once I got into crypto, they're like, "Find somebody else."
Damn.
Yeah,
that's gotta be tough.
It's super complicated. I don't blame them.
No,
it's much easier when you give them a couple W-2s.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot. And I think like, I mean, I do not envy her job. Yeah, it's definitely stressful, especially I think something that she didn't think about and I didn't really think about either to like help protect her from is it was really fun 2 years ago when she was telling everyone how much they owed because they were all rich. And then this past year when she's like, hey, I know the market crashed, but you still owe a lot of money in taxes. That was like not fun conversations to have.
Yeah.
And so I think that has been like pretty draining on them actually and like made them really realize that they have to be also finding people who want to be partners in this long term where like it is not a surprise 3 days before tax day how much you owe in taxes.
Yeah. That's
the big
never
thing
good.
I'm excited about with working with them is because last year, like, I didn't really like. I used WGMI for my cost basis.
Yeah.
Like that's my tool.
Which I don't think that takes into account the date of the transaction, right? Does it?
Has a lot of manual overrides, and
Okay.
I've literally manually overridden like everything to
Gotcha.
either like a custom price or a custom floor,
Yeah.
and it's still a fucking mess. So like, I told Allie, I'm like, yeah, for 2022, like, I definitely got airdrops, which are, as long as I know, like considered income, not considered taxable gains. So like, looks rare. I was an angel investor, and that was like 7.5 ETH that turned into 100 ETH. But that 100 ETH is looked at as income. So it's like, I need to know I need to have USD aside, even if my gains are zero, just to pay off that. It's like, well, how much shit do I have? A Monolith airdrops, Murakami airdrops. There was a bunch of shit.
Yeah.
Beans from Azuki, like from Q1 and Q2,
Ape. Yeah.
People had a bunch of gains that are considered income, not cap gains. So they can't offset those with their tax loss harvests in December.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see like
The other thing that's kind of ridiculous about all of that is like we have all just like collectively listened to like 2 crypto tax accounting firms and been like, this is what it is. This is the rules we know. But
and
like,
it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
but like no one actually knows. Like the IRS has
Yeah.
to come out and said, yeah, actually when you got that Clonex airdrop, that was income. That wasn't cap gains. Like, and so we've all just like have agreed that like essentially token
To fuck
tax
ourselves.
and tax.
We've agreed to fuck
Yeah,
ourselves.
yeah, we're overpaying to the max.
Yeah.
And the IRS is like, man, we don't got a problem with that.
Yeah, so the IRS is like, you know, I'm sure there's some people like high up there and they're like, listen, we've given no guidance, and all of these cowards are just paying us so much fucking money because they have no idea what the actual rules are.
Yeah.
So we'll just sit back and be like, you guys keep paying us. We don't know what the rules are, but I
Well,
wouldn't.
there's all this like chain analysis stuff.
Yeah.
You see chain analysis software being sold to the government. You don't know how that shit works. Like I know people who worked for I think it's called Luxa is one of the chain analysis software companies, and it's like the shit the guy was telling me they know about me. I'm like, Jesus Christ, like I'm just paying everything. I don't give a fuck. Like,
Yeah.
If your software
everyone
is saying
listening
like
should
these
pay
are all
their
the wallets
taxes.
I've ever interacted with, here's a heat map of who I've interacted with, here's a heat map based on where ETH has went, like you can see goddamn everything.
yeah.
And it's like I
think
don't want to
the-
sweat.
Yeah, it's all on chain.
Yeah.
Like it's way easier to embezzle and cheat money outside of the blockchain world than it is in.
Yeah, I think the hard part really for like the IRS is more so understanding all the crazy degen shit. Like,
Yeah.
you can look at the chain analysis and see I put my ETH into this thing and then ended up eventually getting back X, Y, and Z. But like, it does take a certain level of technical knowledge to understand what the fuck was going
Which,
on
like,
in between.
Terra Luna is a great one. Like I bridged a fuckload of stuff from ETH to Terra, and it's like you can't really pin
Because that
my
was all just centralized.
Terra wallet
bridges,
to my
yeah.
ETH wallet. You could look at like the time that I sent it, and then look at the time of like Terra at that time, and then see what wallet received a similar amount on Terra. But like,
Well, look at the current meta right now with like OE Burns. Like, how does that play on a chain if an accountant's looking at it and they go, okay, here's a cost basis, and then it went to zero, and then he got this thing airdropped that is at this price, and then that's, it's like,
is the cost basis
there's
the
a-
initial price of what you burnt? When you burn it, was that a loss?
Well,
Like,
I've heard Allie talk about this to some of her clients, and so I'm sure I'm going to butcher it because it's like me listening in on the back of her calls. But what she was basically saying is you can essentially like transfer over the cost basis in those like burn events, or you can like essentially you can kind of make whatever decision it is you want there, because like there is no real rules, but there's like some way that you can essentially say like my cost basis for this new NFT is the old one because it was a like kind trade.
yeah.
And so I basically just like kind traded this one thing for another, and so the cost basis kind of carries over. Or you could essentially say like I burned this thing and then was airdropped a new thing at a cost basis of zero.
Yeah.
But it's really messy. I think what she recommends to a lot of her people is to basically call it like a like-kind exchange and say that the cost basis carries over.
Yeah.
But fucking taxes.
That makes more sense than like burning a bunch of stuff and saying it's a loss, but then having new stuff that has a $0 cost basis.
Yeah.
Like, taxes suck.
They do.
It's like something you don't really think about when you're not making a lot of money.
Yeah.
And like, I used to look forward to tax time because it'd be like, oh, I'm going to get a couple $1,000 back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now it's like
the number one source of my stress and anxiety.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, it's just, it's so hard to keep track of.
I'd go to TurboTax, plug in my W-2, plug in my like school interest thing, a 1098, whatever, and I was done.
Yeah.
And I got $2,000.
Maybe like some Ally Bank interest.
Yeah. And they paid me $2,000 to do it.
Yeah.
Now it's like I'm paying them 7 figures. Like, what?
And I have no idea if any of it is right.
I remember when I joined the space, some artists were like, I just have the spreadsheet and I keep it all track of everything in a spreadsheet. I'm like, I cannot imagine.
Somebody told me when I first started, they're like, I make everything in a spreadsheet. And that's how I keep track. I was like, no, I'm not going to do that.
It's like someone with, it's like that old like checkbook mentality of like, I'm going to write down what I spent in this
like, it's already
right
on
here.
chain. I'm like, I don't write down my checkbook stuff because I can log into my bank account and look or like Amex and see like, this is what I spent money on.
Yeah.
It's very similar. I could go to Etherscan and be like, this is what I spent money on. So why am I like writing that down?
Gosh, yeah. We'll see. I'm thankful that we're all paying our taxes and we won't go to jail.
No,
it really feels like the right way to go about this.
Yeah, or the other option I see people go to the extreme on is like they denounce their American citizenship to keep 40 to 50% of their gains.
Yeah.
And then they're an expat in fucking Thailand and they don't have a family. And like,
if I didn't have like any real ties to the United States, I would consider it.
Yeah, if I was like somebody who grew up with no family, who got lucky and made it, maybe I'd think about it. But like, my whole family's been here for like generations.
Yeah.
I'm not leaving them.
I mean, there's one thing to move to Miami and get around some stuff, and there's another thing to like, denounce yourself and move to Dubai or something. Like everybody in Dubai, from what I went to Dubai a couple months ago, and like only 10% of the population is people that are from Dubai. The rest are all people that are like going to tax havens essentially. And so it's like, but Americans can't do that because no matter where you go as an American, you have to pay taxes back to America. Mm-hmm. So there's like almost no Americans there. It's very weird. But it's like.
Does that create a weird, so I've never been there, but how's the culture like there knowing
there
that
isn't
like.
a culture really.
Well, I think that's part of why they're trying to bring in artists and stuff is like do installations and make more culture because the whole culture is so fresh. The whole city is like, the whole country is like 40 years old in terms of like building. Mm-hmm. And so everything is brand new. It's really pristine and nice.
It's very clean.
Yeah. But they don't have much culture yet because it's a melting pot. I keep thinking about like New York in say like 1900. There wasn't really a big art scene. There was a lot of artists from other places doing kind of like traditional art in New York. And then that melting pot over 50 years became the beatnik culture, became the Andy Warhol world and all this stuff. And then New York now has a scene, has a style, has a feel. I feel like Dubai is pre that melting pot becoming unique aspect. And that's why I think they're like really trying to import a lot of culture and a lot of artists and a lot of things to like, how do we make this, what would be Dubai art, So I thought that was like pretty interesting.
So did they like offer you money to move to Dubai? Like how do they import culture?
No,
it's like through incentives.
They invited me to do a drop at Art Dubai, which I'm going to do.
Nice.
And so
when is Art Dubai?
I believe it's in March, the beginning of March.
God damn it.
But yeah, so it was like,
why is everything the first 3 months of the year?
But I know they're like, working with artists to do like installations and like, there's really cool stuff going on there. But yeah, I think it's so unique because it's like New York. This building is probably, maybe this building's pretty new, but New York is like hundreds of years old.
Yeah,
everything there is like 20 years old. And so it's just wild to like. We went to some mosque that looks like the Taj Mahal. It's like, this is what the Taj Mahal looked like the day it came out, essentially, versus like hundreds of years later, So I thought that was just like super interesting.
I really liked my time in Dubai. I was only there for like a week once, but it's a cool place. I mean, it's super interesting, like you were saying. And it's weird how there's like no culture, but that kind of is the culture, is that it's just like a ton of different people
it's very
who are all like pretty wealthy.
Yeah.
That's like kind of the vibe. There's not a lot of places you can drink. Mm-hmm. So it's mostly just like hotels. So like most restaurants or most like big restaurants you go out to eat in are in hotels because that's where you can also get alcohol.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lots of really gorgeous hotels. It's a very interesting place.
I would say I drank a lot of alcohol there, and I never got drunk. But it's all like $30 drinks.
Yeah.
They're very watered
Super
down.
expensive.
Super expensive area place. Yeah. Super expensive.
Bull run only.
But I mean, like, so Allie's parents lived there for a while, which is why I went. Her dad would travel a lot for work. And so they were living on the Palm. And so the Palm is essentially this totally man-made area. Goes out into the water, and so it's shaped like almost like a palm
fan or something.
Yeah, and so it has all the fronds that go out, and so those are basically these massive fucking sand dunes that they build out into the water, and they build these like massive luxury houses on them, and each house is like a beachfront property. They basically found the way to make the most possible beachfront property.
Like, how can we get more surface area?
Yeah.
Of beachfront?
And so it's just all these lines of houses going out, all beachfront property. But it was like, I mean, it was fucking gorgeous. You'd wake up every morning and go walk down to the end of your palm and on the beach, and there's like birds out and the water's like crystal clear. It was, I mean, if you could like afford the lifestyle and all that, it seems like a great place to just, if all you want to do is sit by the pool and hang out and like chill and not pay taxes.
If you're straight edge, it's a great place to
Yeah. But I mean, you can get alcohol. Like they were able to get beer and stuff there, but it was crazy expensive.
Yeah.
Like Allie's dad just loves Coors Light. And I think he was paying like $60 for a 12-pack of Coors Light or something.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I thought you were about to say $60 a can.
Oh, yeah.
I was like,
I mean, depending on where you go, honestly, maybe. It was really pricey there, but...
horrible for weed, I've heard.
Yeah. I thought it was really chill. I mean, we also stayed in Abu Dhabi, which is like, they're trying to make that like the cultural center. Mm-hmm. And so what I think is wild is that they bought the name the Louvre from the Louvre. And so they have Louvre Abu Dhabi. And now they're building Guggenheim Abu Dhabi. And they basically buy the names for like 60 years and then get to share the collection to a degree. Wow. And so they're just basically like absorbing the most amazing collections in the world.
That's really interesting. Aren't they also building like the wall somewhere in there or something? Is that there? Or is that?
I think that's Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, Saudi Arabia.
That's
big,
crazy.
Yeah,
the
that's
city
wild.
that's just a wall.
Yeah,
that's some like Blade Runner stuff right there.
Yeah, I don't know how.
But you want to live in that? You said you like a walkable
it's very,
city.
It's a Judge Dredd is kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll move there only if I can become an enforcer.
Yeah. it looks like the Halo movies or whatever.
Yeah,
it's like this like weird line that goes forever. I'll visit it probably because that sounds wild. Yeah. But it sounds like they frame it as this like really luxury thing, but then it could easily become like a Judge Dredd slums quickly.
Yeah, I think that the interesting thing about like Dubai and even to a larger extent, like whatever they're calling the wall, like is kind of this idea, and we don't really get to have it in America of like knowing what we know now. How would you build a city?
Yes.
And I think we'll eventually see that in America where like we will see some smaller city, whether it's like a Detroit or something like of that nature.
Yeah.
I think we'll see one of those, maybe like in Austin, turn into like this massive tech bubble city where like they had the luxury of not having all of this baggage of building a city before we had like much better technology.
Yes.
And like I'm just really curious to see what a major industrial city would look like being built with everything we know in current time, and how different it would be from New York City now. Because I know it wouldn't be New York City.
Yeah, well, it reminds me of like what Walt Disney was trying to do with that Epcot village he was building prior to Epcot being the park or whatever, which was like this big round thing. Some of the people I met in Dubai, they live in neighborhoods that have no streets. They're basically walled off, streetless neighborhoods where everyone just walks around and like kids walk to school no problem. And it's all like all solar powered and stuff. It's like, oh man, this is like some real futuristic stuff right
That was one of my favorite things about visiting Europe. I'd never been to Europe until September, and we went to Croatia, and we visited Diocletian's palace, and like everything was made to be walkable. You can't fit a car. They're pulling trash bags with like little buggies.
Yeah.
These. Like some of the alleyways were so thin or narrow that you can only fit one person single file down it.
Wow.
And like that felt like the future, but it's the past. Like in a way, like it felt like, why do we have nothing like this in America? Well, I mean, debatably New York City, but there's no like single fucking palace walkways or like, oh, we built this before cars or even like you can't get a horse and buggy really
Yeah,
in the palace.
no.
Which was crazy to me. And I was like, damn, there's no place like that in Ohio.
Yeah.
Everything in Ohio is like, you gotta drive. And I'm sure it's like Nebraska.
Yeah,
where it's
yeah.
just like, there was never a thought. So
Do you get back to Nebraska often?
Yeah. Well, I just drove through Ohio to get to Nebraska for the holidays.
you drive every
Yeah.
time?
Well, usually that way I have my car in Omaha. But this time we did a trip where I went to my family in Nebraska. So we drove from New York to Nebraska. Then I went down to my family in Georgia and then back up. So it was like a big circle around half of America pretty much. But yeah, I go back to Nebraska probably like once or twice a year.
Nice.
And then down to Georgia once a year.
You
Is that
have
where your
in-laws in
wife's
Georgia
from?
or other family?
My
or-
mother lives in Georgia. My grandmother lives in Georgia. My father and brother and my wife's family live in Nebraska.
Nice. Did you meet your wife in Nebraska growing up?
No, we met in New York. Actually, probably a few blocks from here.
Oh, wow.
How'd that happen?
Through a friend from Omaha. That was like
Okay,
that
so-
was like, you two should hang out. And so yeah, it wasn't like, yeah, it wasn't too serendipitous, but we grew up like a mile apart from each other, but never met each other.
That's
And
awesome.
She had dated people that I went to high school with and stuff, but I never knew her.
And what does she do?
She is a packaging designer, so
Oh, wow.
she's a very talented graphic artist and makes, you know, like what you'd see here, that's like Fiji bottle or something, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So she works in a lot of like prototyping and concepts for brands, and
Nice.
when say like Hershey's wants to make a new product, they have to make like 10 fake products that they pitch to a room full of women and say, which one of these would you want to buy? And so she'll make all the fake ones and then develop the final one as well.
That's really
That's
interesting.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of I don't know. It's both design and this kind of like using a part of the brain that like hits in like what pops out on a shelf mentality, which is a very interesting way of like thinking about art.
Yeah.
It's this kind of manipulative art in a good way.
Yeah,
In a
the,
good-
the human
it's
psychology
like
aspect
what
of it.
what
you
makes
ever-
it stand out.
Have you ever tried to get her to make some NFTs?
I don't know. She's there's a few of my NFTs where she's drawn some frames of the animation, like some of those like flicker neon ones. Some of the frames in there she's done, but no, I think she wants to stay out of it for the most part. She keeps saying that she has to make the real world money while I make the virtual money.
It's a good team.
Yeah.
That's
I feel like it's important to have someone like that in your life who can keep you grounded and be like,
Yeah.
yeah, you keep doing the magic internet money stuff, sweetie. I'll
No,
get
and
but
if
she-
the magic internet
yeah.
beans don't grow any beanstalks, I'm
Yeah.
still here, babe.
She's very supportive, but yeah, she doesn't want to put all the eggs in one basket. And I think she's more, introverted. I think being in the NFT space requires you to be, at least forces you to be extroverted in a lot of ways.
I have to fake it, yeah.
And a lot of I think most artists are introverted, but we all have to kind of like shill and put ourselves out there in a way that puts us out of our comfort zone. And I think a lot of artists just don't want to put themselves in that position. You're putting a big spotlight on yourself when you
Yeah.
become an artist in this space.
Yeah, I guess it's something I've been meaning to ask a couple different artists, and so now I'm going to ask you because you're the first one where I've actually made it happen. What was the transition like for you from being someone who was relatively working behind the scenes, making TV shows, doing all of that? Not that you were like no one, but you were for the most part unknown by the general public.
No one looked at those shows and said, "Oh, that's Brian's work."
Yeah, how has that transition gone to being someone where like there are a lot of people on the internet who know who you are and care about both your work and what you do, and also have like some amount of, monetary exposure to your work in a certain way? Like, has that been weird at all, or a transition?
It definitely puts a stress on you when that was one of the reasons I went full time into NFTs, because I was like, I think someone had paid us a couple $1,000s for my Nifty pieces, and I was like, oh well, it's not fair to these people that are investing in me if I'm not putting all of myself into that investment. So that did weigh on me to a degree. And then, going back to the Newgrounds, I've always been socially active on all these sites, Tumblr, Instagram, whatever. So that part came natural to me. What became hard was the amount of people that reach out to you, and you want to give them all time. You want, like, artists will say, "Hey, I have a question." You want to give them enough time. But that was a lot easier early on, and now it's a lot harder for me to like effectively give people the time that they want. And so, having a Discord's good for that because I can kind of talk to everybody at once. But it is something that, it's hard when people go, oh, what do you do for a living? It's like, oh, well, I make art probably a third of the day. And then the other third, I'm like marketing to a degree. And then the other third, I'm just talking to people, whether it's about my art or just about whatever, sitting in a Discord, just talking to people. I think it's just a lot of interacting with people all the time. And I don't think we comprehend how many people we talk to on a daily basis in this space, but it's like dozens to hundreds, I feel like. So,
I would say on an average day, I communicate one-to-one, either through replies, DMs, or whatever, to at least 100 people.
Yeah.
Like, that seems like table stakes.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was saying to Allie, I guess it was last night, how, like, especially while we're recording 2 of these podcasts a day, it's basically like, it's almost 8 hours where I'm not really answering very many things. And I get home and I have all this stuff on, like, unread messages. Yeah. I go reply to all of them, put my phone down, have some dinner, go look again.
They're all there.
I have more than I...
Because everybody responds.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you have 100 messages to get through, you're probably going to send 500 total because they're going to have a response that you're going to respond to and then respond again. And it's like, you have to draw the line somewhere or you start to lose your sanity. And you let being a people pleaser ruin your own mental health. Like, that is the relationship I had. At some point, I had to turn my DMs off because I was collecting art from so many people, following so many people. I was like, I follow 5,000 people. You can DM me on Twitter. Yeah. That's still a lot. Like, I get just on Twitter, it feels like over a few dozen DMs every day. Yeah. But then on Discord or Telegram, it's open. So it's like they find me and get me there when they're persistent. But it's not just like the floodgate is open on Twitter. Yeah. Because that message request area can be a dark place. Especially when people see you're making money. Yes. Like, I've read so many fucked up things that I just assume are all false. Yeah. But, like, people sending me pictures of mutilated babies being my baby needs a surgery or is going to die. I had an artist threaten to kill himself if I didn't host a space for him. Like, I've had so much fucking shit come to me. And it's like, from me trying to help people, it actually, like, hurt my own mentality. Yeah. And I just had to realize, like, I need to put my mask on first again. I need to make sure my cup is full before I start pouring it in the others, or I'm going to go fucking crazy. Yeah. And it's just been a learning experience because I never had followers. Yeah. Anyone who would reach out, I would love to talk to. And that's just who I am and how I've been. And then the next thing you know, it's like too many people are reaching out. Yeah. Too many people are trying to get your attention. It's like,
I had one yesterday and the guy, some guy sent me a message. He's like, nice job on the rug, man. And then he blocked me. And I'm like, what is he talking about? Which rug? What did I do? Give me more info on this, please. Yeah. But he blocked me. So I was like, all right, well, I'll just have to sit on this one, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that like I tried to get good at is just very quickly either muting or blocking people who like clearly are just trying to give you shit or give you a hard time.
But then you block them and then they get the visible signal that they got under your skin.
Mute's the way to go.
The mute button is the best, because the block is like, they tweet it. Yeah. Like they get engagement off it. They like feed off that. Whereas the mute is more subtle because they might keep yelling into the abyss, not realizing the abyss isn't looking back at them.
Muting's good, and muting words is good for your mental health.
What's your favorite word that you have muted?
Well, I don't want to say it's like PFP projects that I didn't buy into that I don't want that good. Like,
just like mute the title of it.
Crazy amounts. I'm like mute moonbirds. So I have a moonbird. I don't want to see any more about it. So it's like it's more of just like when I sold my Fidenza, they then like ripped like crazy. And it's like, I love Tyler, but I had to mute the word Fidenza because I was like, I cannot look at Fidenza sales for a while. Like, I don't want to think about my mistake.
I sold my Fidenza for $100,000.
Whenever I see like a chance I missed, I'll mute it so that because that stuff weighs on you mentally. Yeah. And you're just like, oh, missed opportunity. I could have had $1 million or something. It's like, you have to just kind of like put that out of your mind a little bit. So I don't mute anything that like I think is bad or anything, but I mute things that I'm like, this will bring me down if I see it on my feed too much.
That's a lot of wisdom there. I don't know if I have any muted words.
I don't think I do.
I might need to start doing that. Open edition.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking.
I
I'm not gonna
yeah.
do open edition.
Yeah, I don't have to, I mute a lot of people's retweets.
Yes.
That's something that I do. I turn off retweets for a lot of people.
Yes.
What do you mean?
So you can go to someone's profile and say, I don't want to see anything they retweet.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
This happens a lot
Go ahead.
for artists for me.
I was going to say the same thing, where it's like,
We share a lot of other artists, yeah.
yeah, well, and no, it's not even like necessarily that. I feel like every once in a while, someone will drop something that's maybe like a larger collection or something, and then a bunch of people will be tweeting out like, just bought my this by this person, and they're just fucking retweeting every single one, and it's like, it's cool you did this, and that's great. I don't need my entire feed
That's fair, yeah.
to be other people tweeting about how they bought this thing.
Yeah.
And so like, I still want to see your regular tweets. I don't need to see what you're just.
So mine is normally
cool.
if I'm scrolling and I see like 6 consecutive retweets on the TweetDeck feed, I'm just like, you just waste. I have to scroll to read something now because you just spammed all these. So I do have retweets muted.
That's good. That's some good alpha.
That's something I do for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And it, like, that's something. It's another thing too, where it makes me think like, how often am I retweeting things too often?
I have a really big problem with this. I'm trying to get the podcast out for people, and I set retweets on all of my clips that we post, and I'll set 9 retweets, and it's like 2 or 3 a day for 3 days because the algorithm fucking sucks. It's hard to get attention. I found out I didn't do this at first, and I found out like so many people I knew didn't even know we had a podcast.
Yeah.
They were like, how long you been doing this? I'm like, 3 months. They're like, how is this the first I've heard about it? And I'm like, okay, maybe I'm not doing it enough.
It's hard. Well, when I did my NFTs drop, I gave every previous holder a free mint, and I was like, how do I reach these people effectively without like just spamming it or hand DMing
you don't want
200 plus people? Which some if they were big holders and stuff, I tried to do that, but sometimes they're hard to find out who this wallet is and stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's like you just have to like put that out there and hope it's seen sometimes. But
Yeah.
the way you guys act with retweets is how I act when I see a Discord at everyone too much. I
Yes.
just go like, show me nothing from this.
If you
anymore.
at everyone more than once a day, I mute it.
So now I noticed like last week they have a thing that just mute at everyone.
Oh.
But you can keep at your name.
I pretty actively now, if I don't go into a Discord for like a week, I just leave the Discord. And so like and
Very smart.
And whenever someone sends me a Discord for something, I say, sorry, something personal. If I join this, I'm not going to be as active as people would want me to be, and I don't want people to think I'm being rude or ignoring them. I just don't join new Discords anymore.
What do they call it? Irish exiting. I just do that on Discords. But when it comes to like Twitter DMs, I have to be like, hey guys, I love you. But I gotta like close down a little bit
because it puts it in the chat.
Yeah.
Like Bryan Brinkman left the chat.
Yeah.
Like, oh fuck, what happened? So like when you Irish exit that, it's like, oh.
One of my favorite Irish exit tactics, and this one's like much more lighthearted, is when like I'm connecting 2 people on Telegram.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to just like be in all these Telegram chats where I've connected 2 people, and so like, you know, half the time you make the group chat, it's the 3 of you, and then the 2 people are like, all right, let's bounce to our own chat. We don't need to keep Andy in here. And the other half of the time they don't. And so that was just like annoying for me.
Yeah.
And so now what I do anytime I connect to people on Telegram is I add them both to the group. I immediately make one of the other 2 the owner, and then Irish exit the group.
Nice.
And so I don't even say goodbye or anything. I just throw them both in and then leave.
I do that on Twitter DMs all the time because you
Yeah.
can leave the conversation.
I'm gonna leave the conversation because I need to pee.
All right. We could probably wrap up relatively soon too.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, I mean, these are big Fiji waters, you know.
Dude,
Is Fiji a sponsor?
they need to be. No, we like literally have an email chain with Liquid Death. We need to start working on that. So as we're
Nice.
like starting to grow stuff, we need to start figuring out kind of some more.
Got to get that ape water money.
Yeah, I know exactly. That's what I'm saying. Maybe just like we do a little water, we start our own water brand. But no, it's funny because we previously were doing them in a studio, and so we had very strict time slots. And now that we're just here, all like the last season, I think the longest one we did was maybe an hour and 45 minutes.
What are we clocking in at right now?
Probably almost 2 hours.
Whoa,
over
cool.
2 hours. Yeah.
Holy
so like
moly.
we did one with Anonymous.
Sorry to the editor.
Oh, I mean, it's great though. I mean, like, yeah.
Sorry.
I don't feel bad for him. Like we did one with Anonymous on Tuesday.
Yeah.
And we went for 2 hours and 58 minutes.
Holy moly!
And honestly, it felt like we could have gone longer. We
Yeah.
had the same thing with who did we talk to yesterday? It's all a blur.
Wow.
What? Yesterday wasn't Tuesday.
No. That was the first day.
Was Gossamer? No.
Was Drift and
Jameis.
Jameis.
Yeah, Jameis from ChangeDAO.
Oh.
And both of them, we like, and like all these conversations, it's like, okay, we could keep doing the same thing for another 3 hours.
Yeah.
It feels like, and so it's more just like I have to kind of be the bad guy once we hit 2 hours.
no, that's totally fine.
And it's like, okay, maybe we can start wrapping it up at some
Well,
point.
it's like-
Welcome back.
Because Andy knows me. I will sit here and talk until the sun goes down. It'll be like
Yeah.
4 a.m.
Yeah.
Well, you guys are really. I mean, I'm really impressed with you on like spaces and stuff because, like, this is a conversation I can talk to forever because we can just jump around topics and like deep dive into things. When it comes to spaces, I get so much anxiety about like jumping in and saying stuff really fast and then getting out and like not interrupting people and like it just drives me crazy.
Spaces has started to feel like a game of Jeopardy where like you're trying to unmute and start talking first. Like you don't even need an answer. You don't even need something to say.
Yeah.
You just need to unmute and start talking so that nobody fills the silence first. Yeah. And it's a really awkward thing. It's way different than here where I can look at you, see that you're thinking, pause so I don't interrupt you. Spaces, it's like if there's a quarter second of dead air, I need to jump in and just start stream of consciousness talking. And it's been a good skill to build up. It's not something
it's a great skill.
I thought I had. Like I was never a public speaker. I was always scared of public speaking, but because of the way that I came up in the spaces, it worked. Like I didn't try to be who I became. I just was like talking to my friend on his car ride home.
Yeah.
And then that kind of evolved into like, well, I want to host a space when my friend isn't in the car and he's only in the car for this 45-minute block of time in LA traffic. So then I started hosting Lindy walks, and next thing you know, talking to artists that I've collected from. Justin Aversano comes up, tells me talk to Kath Samard. Talked to Kath Samard for like 5 hours. Got like 10 adventure photographers on stage, and it's like, this is way fucking better than reading all those descriptions and learning about the art through text. Like now I get to talk to the artist and just like pick their brain.
Yeah.
Well, this is way better. And then
I like that.
Within a month, I became like the guy that you asked to host a space because I host everything for free. It was just like, yeah, of course I want to hear about your drop.
Yeah.
But then it got to the point where I felt used. It was like, oh, people just want to be friends with me, so I host space. It's not like they really cared. And then it got weird. And then you could probably tell that I host a lot less now than I did back then because the vibe was off.
Yeah.
And that's why we've pivoted to this,
Yeah.
where we get to sit down with somebody like a space, but we get to go deep, and I get to ask you, how was life like in Nebraska? Like, what was college life like? And then
I love it. I love deep dives.
It feels so much
these
better.
conversations also feel a lot more like they can kind of stand the test of time in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like I think there was very little we've talked about over the last 2 hours where if you listen to this in 6 months, it's like a worthless conversation.
Yeah.
Which I think is really nice. Whereas Twitter Spaces in a lot of ways are very ephemeral, and it's about a conversation that's in the moment of what is this thing that's happening right now that we are talking about. And obviously sometimes that's not the case.
Yeah.
But
and then sometimes we talk to an artist about like a drop they're maybe doing soon or something. But
yeah,
it like Josie Bellini brought up earlier. I loved when I came in the space in 2020, the NFT space. She was like, her and Mikul from Vertical Crypto Art were the only two people, and Andrew Steinwald, Zima Red. Those are like the only three people talking to artists.
Yeah.
And
I think Ikaitsa and Matthew Farrick had some like scent show and stuff. But yeah, doing Behind the Art with Josie was like my I made it moment. Because I'd learned from so many people in the space from that show. Yeah,
like Matt Cain was one of the first episodes I watched, and like just having that available now, like people could go back and watch you on Josie's show.
And that was after that show. If you go on that show, I show Nimbud's pre-mint because I'm like, here's the test renders of my next project. So that's how early it was.
That's cool.
And then people can come back to this show and be like, oh, this was Bryan, about 2 years later. And then it's kind of this trail of timeless conversations that you can get a distinct look at that year's perspective.
That's true.
which I selfishly have done that for like a lot of the Joe Rogan stuff I used to watch. It's like I'll go back and listen to one that I listened to 4 years ago and then see how the information's changed in my head. Normally it's, quite a different perspective, but that's why I like these conversations so much.
Can I pitch you on 2 Spaces shows that I'll probably never make that I think are fun ideas?
100%.
Okay. The first one is a radio hour where no one talks and I just become a radio DJ and I'm like, next up is Ed Balloon, and play the song and you just make a radio show essentially. And you just play music for an hour. I think no one's doing that.
I think that's a really good idea.
It's a great idea.
And then the other idea is a show called What's in Your Wallet? And I invite people up on stage and then I look in their wallet and I call out all the worst things in their wallet. And I'm like, what the fuck is this?
Both of those are good.
Yeah, I like both of them.
But I think that puts me in an aggressive space that I don't think I could do. It's more of like a Beanie show, I think.
Yeah. Oh, man. Shout out to Beanie.
we could do, I think we could do that.
What, get Beanie on the pod?
Oh, no. I mean,
we could.
if we go to Antigua.
Yeah. I think there's something funny about that of like, the humiliation of like, what, you paid this much for this thing? What were you thinking?
Yeah.
What's going on here?
Would you want someone to do that to your own wallet? I would let someone do it to me first. The first episode would be my wallet getting roasted. And then
like, you roasting your own wallet.
I wouldn't hold back on anyone else's if my own got roasted.
Yeah.
But I like the radio hour because we are seeing the evolution of Spaces to now have everyone has a roadcaster hooked up to their phone. And they're piping in audio from their computer and other sources. Like
the main issue I have is the audio always sounds terrible whenever they pump in music. It's always like,
even though it's coming from the roadcaster. It's
for some reason like the streams just sound terrible.
It's something with Spaces.
It would be fun to like curate an hour of music, and you could like bring in NFT music artists and like play their stuff, and it could become a platform for like sharing NFT music as well as just playing new music. I had talked to Pio about it. I'm like, is there any like rules with like playing music? He's like, it's a Wild West, man. There's no rules.
No, I could definitely see something like that. I feel like a Web3 native one would be cool. Like you have like Latasha or Ed.
Yeah, it could be a cool
Daniel
platform.
Allen or whoever.
But I don't know. It's like you could easily do it on like Twitch or something.
Run out.
Don't steal it. No, I'm just kidding. You guys
could do it. Did you watch the Pleaser House auction the other day with Edward Snowden? So I am very excited. And it was somewhat my idea, so I'm a bit biased with a lot of this, but I'm like really excited about kind of the tech that they built for this. And so it is essentially like a live streaming platform that they built from the ground up. So it's still early, like it's a little bit shaky, but it works with like Web3 Rails. And so their first live stream they did last week was with Edward Snowden auctioning off like another Freedom of the Press Foundation NFT. And they had like a live stream Twitch chat, and they had like a built-in auction mechanics in the stream. And then like everyone could connect with the wallet, claim POAPs, all of that. And then it was just a live stream. And I feel like there's going to be a whole new, like, because you mentioned Twitch and made me think about it. I feel like we're going to see this whole new kind of like series of things that are like Twitter Spaces that, maybe are better off with video or with all these different things that maybe it's not on Pleaser House, but on similar types of software that like let you do this like crypto native media host kind of like fan interaction stuff. I think it'd be really fun.
Yeah, I think that was my issue with Clubhouse right now, is that it was not a visual platform, and NFTs are a visual medium. Twitter kind of got a solution with like pinning retweets, but it's still not perfect. So it's always been like, what platform is really going to be the thing that people want to share their work on? And I think, the Portal guys have been doing a pretty good job of doing like YouTube streams of their like morning show, and I think that's like a pretty smart move.
I think that's what I've noticed. There was a day where Twitter Spaces went down, I think.
Yeah.
Like they just didn't work.
I remember that.
And that was the day that I felt like not only I noticed Nick and PIOs, but then like Rug Radio started doing another one where they had the stream up.
Yeah.
And I think like Rect Radio started doing it. I don't know if Carson does it for the Daily Dose, but I noticed like, they're now supplementing with video because like they're in front of it anyway.
Yeah, and
like
that video content can then be pushed to so many other platforms. It's like that Mr. Beast thing. I was watching Mr. Beast talk, and he just goes, and he's like, he's very handsy.
Yeah. Did you watch him on Lex Friedman?
You got to do this, man. We're gonna do this and this. It's very
recently.
It's a visual thing. What?
Did you watch him on Lex Friedman recently? Like he just did it a couple weeks ago, or maybe
on
last
what
week.
called Straightment?
Lex Friedman.
Oh, and Friedman. Oh, I watched like 20 minutes of it.
Yeah.
Was it good?
Yeah, I watched it all.
I thought it was interesting. I mean, I think he's doing brilliant things with like the translating his languages and stuff. Brilliant.
I think we have a lot to learn from him. Like, he definitely just kind of jumped in. We're like, all right, let's just focus on having good conversations.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, we're getting to that point. Like, I think our conversations are really good, but it's like, fuck, we need way better thumbnails. We need better titles. We need better everything.
better
So I think his
shorts.
thumbnails are corny, but they're very effective at getting
Yeah, I mean,
views.
he's done all the A/B testing. Like, my mouth open. I'm making a weird face. There's a fucking white outline. Here's white text with a black outline with thick stroke that makes it pop. Like, it's a formula.
Yeah.
And it does work. Like,
Yes, you're gonna see photos of me. You'll never believe what Brian said.
I have Weesh editing my punk so that the mouth is 2 pixels open. So it's like,
Yeah. No, it's we can all learn from everybody, and he's definitely crushing it on like so many different so many verticals. I don't know. It's like, but like
He's 24.
The fact that I can buy Mr. Beast
crazy.
burgers on Seamless at my house in Westchester is like so ridiculous.
Are they good? Have you had one?
I've not had them.
the ghost kitchens are iffy. Like, I had one in Columbus, and it just wasn't good. But
It's always interesting to like figure out what the ghost kitchens are. You're like, wait a second, that's in a bear burger. And you're like, okay. That's
my
not
ghost
chicken
kitchen
place.
in Columbus was in like a Bravo Italian cuisine. Like, you type it in and you're like, oh, the address is like the Bravo Italian restaurant. It's like, it may as well be Olive Garden.
Yeah.
That whole model is really interesting to me. Like my friend Jack Settleman, who does shout out to Jack, he's great. He does a lot of sports content, and he's really big on Snapchat. And he's started doing their whole thing is like Snapback Sports. They now do like a chicken tender ghost kitchen thing, and they're in like a bunch of different states, like major cities. And they like move serious volume of chicken tenders without having a single real location. It's all order online, just like ghost kitchen stuff through like some company that basically like does this as a service now.
Yeah.
For like influencers, to open up like very low lift like food ordering services. It's really, really interesting.
You know who was on the early front of that was Steve Aoki.
Yeah.
My buddy Chase, who's like a writer, he was out there and he found out that there was this pizza shop, Aoki Pizza, that also was like happy pizza and healthy pizza. And like, it was like all these variants of like super meat pizza. And like, it was like trying to hit all these different pizza demographics of like, is it who wants to buy it? But it was all made out of the exact same oven.
That's
and
smart.
they all had different boxes, and they were able to basically have 5 different pizza things out of one location.
Yeah. That's really smart.
It's crazy. Like, I feel partially deceived as a consumer. Like, it's not completely transparent, you know? What am I eating and who made it? But I feel really weird about this like influencer culture we have as somebody who has kind of became an influencer accidentally. Like, I feel really weird selling anything, dropping anything, doing anything that in my head like extracts value.
Yeah.
Like selling chicken tenders that I didn't make from a restaurant I've never seen.
Yeah.
But it's where the world's going, and I like try to tell myself I need to embrace it.
Yeah. And it's like, if people want to buy this stuff,
Yeah, it's the same.
it's not like, you know, something like selling food, whether it's a burger or tenders or whatever. It's not like have some false promises of future utility. The utility is I'm selling you chicken tenders and you can eat them.
Yeah.
And like, if people are happy to buy that because they like you and want to buy your chicken tenders, like, who gives a shit, really?
I'm gonna try it with weed gummies. We're getting there. We're talking to Redbeard and friends. We'll have some gummies, but
That's the way to do it. But yeah, we'll
when
have our own burger spots in
I
5
can
years.
imagine like Brinkman wrappers for burgers and like the Brinkman fry container.
Yeah.
Like,
I did do a vodka bottle drop like 2.5 years ago.
Really?
And that was fun. It kind of looked like this, bottle wise, and I did like a sticker on it and
What
stuff.
brand was it?
It was done through Rarible. It was the early days.
Oh, wow.
It was this artist named Mr. Y helped produce it with like some Austrian distillery.
do you have a bottle of it sealed like
No, I
forever?
never got one in the mail.
What?
He ran into this issue where he was like, "Oh, I actually can't ship these to America because of like legal reasons." And so then he was like, "I can like sell the bottles without the alcohol." It became this whole nightmare of like, you come
Damn,
up
I
with
can't
these,
believe that wasn't thought about originally. Can't believe we have
it was
American
like,
buyers for these.
me and a lot of money, and did some bottles, but I never got to see them in person. I've seen photos of them. They look pretty
It's
nice.
a shame. I always hate when I like agree to give my likeness or like IP to a project, and then I don't get like the thing that they're using it on.
Yeah.
Like that's only happened once or twice, but that's like I'm never gonna talk to you guys again. You made something and didn't even include me, but you used my whether it was like me writing paragraphs of a thought piece or me letting you take pictures of me or you using my punk for something.
Yeah.
Like
I do. Sometimes I like help projects with an agreement that they can't use my name in any way. I'm like, I'll help you, but you can't put my name in your decks or your.
Yeah, you can't use me as advertising.
Yeah, but I'm happy to help because if like otherwise you got to pay me. You know, if you're gonna like leverage me to like get money in some way.
Yeah, I had that happen once where someone was like asking me to angel invest in something, and I was like, oh yeah, maybe like I'll think about it. And then like someone else DM'd me, and they were like, hey, like these people reached out saying that you were angel investing and that I should too. And I was like, okay, well now I'm not angel investing anymore. Like that's weird.
Yeah, no, it's always frustrating when that kind of stuff happens. Where like, especially they do it a lot with artists.
I'm sure.
Where they're like, they reach out to 5 artists and then they tell the next artist, hey, we're working with these guys. And then you reach out to those artists and they're like, no, we haven't agreed to anything yet. And you're like, oh, okay. Because especially when I joined the space early on, it was like, yeah, they'd be like, oh yeah, we have a lot of money doing this project. Well, I was like, if a lot of does it, then it's probably cool, you know. And I'll say, yeah, you know, there is a method of like wooing over other artists if other artists sign on.
Yeah,
there's a lot of signaling.
Yeah, but a lot of people will lie about it.
Well, I don't want to be the roadkill here, but I do have like a bit of a heart out in a little bit.
You have a Broadway play to go to.
Going to see Moulin Rouge tonight with my family.
Ooh.
Yeah, and so I do want to ask you. We have one question that we ask everyone as we kind of go out on a podcast. If you or when you have an autobiography that you do, what would the title of it be?
I'm trying to think of a funny pun. Something like no strings attached or strung out
that's a
or
good
something.
one.
Strung out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I like that.
No strings attached.
That's awesome.
Strung out.
Yeah.
I could see the strings just like the Nimba just all down over it.
There's like a marionette puppet.
If you made it, do you know how some of those books have like the built-in bookmarks?
Oh yeah. Oh, that could be the color bookmarks.
Yeah. A Brinkman
like
built-in bookmark
That'd be
that
pretty
has
fun.
the 4 colors, or like
Or you could get 4 different strings so you could mark different spots in the book.
no anything.
Yeah,
That'd be sick.
fun.
I like it.
But it's called No Strings Attached, and there's 4 strings actually attached. Like that would be kind of funny.
Yeah.
I don't know. But dude, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us, man.
This
This has
was a
been
great
great.
Yeah,
So-
this was really fun.
I had a
It was
blast.
We've got to hang out at dinners. We've got to vibe IRL a lot, but like we haven't got to sit down and really
true.
get to know each other like this.
Yeah.
So
We're always in like parties. So this was great.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's like selfishly why we like doing this. We get to know people a lot better.
yeah.
Any shout outs or things you're looking forward to 2023 to wrap up as we close?
Shout outs. When will this air?
About a month and a half or 2 months.
Yeah, so I think probably if you live in the Dubai area, go to Art Dubai and buy my piece because it's only available there. So I'm really hitting a small market there. And yeah, I'll probably be at a bunch of these like NFT events coming forward. So if you're listening to this, and come up and say hi.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Until next time.